Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started by just officially welcoming all of you guys to Wat Tung. Sawadee Khap. Welcome to all of you guys. This is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group on Saturdays. What we do is we come together and we study the words of the Buddha, where on Sundays and Wednesdays we have a foundational program where I teach from... Sorry, 1 second. This is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group on Saturdays. What we do is we come together and we study the words of the Buddha. Okay, sorry about that. This is only the third time that we've live streamed from this temple. Usually I live stream from home, so we're getting all the equipment working and all that kind of stuff. But what I was sharing is that this is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the original words of the Buddha, and students will typically have taken one of our foundational programs or foundational courses first, which on Sundays and Wednesdays is our group learning program, which students are learning from volume 1 of this book series that I share, and they're building up their foundational teachings and their understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. And there's also courses and things like this, retreats that I teach that are foundational programs. And in fact, this week on Monday, we're starting a foundational course, which is Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You guys are all invited. You're welcome to come. It's available to you at no cost, where you can learn foundational teachings of the Buddha and build up your practice towards the attainment of enlightenment. On Sunday and Wednesday, this is our group learning program where I teach. It's a 7-month program where students can learn here at the temple, but I also live stream at nighttime as well from home. We're just starting the live stream now from the temple so that students who are all over the world can join in, because they usually only are able to join in at nighttime, Thai time, but now we have the availability for students to join at all different times, either in the morning or in the evening as I'm teaching. So what we do in this program is we start with a meditation in order to guide you guys in meditation and help you to learn meditation and develop your practice. And then after the meditation, I will switch over to sharing the words of the Buddha. And the way that we typically study is a student will read the chapter from the book. There'll be a volunteer who might decide to read the chapter. These chapters are oftentimes just one paragraph or 2 paragraphs. They're not like multiple pages or anything like that. And then after a student reads the section of the words of the Buddha, then I will share some teachings on that particular chapter. Then I'll open up to any questions that students might have related to the teachings of the Buddha. This is where you'll actually be able to learn what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach by studying with his original words. But I'd just like you to understand, if this is your first time coming here or studying the teachings of the Buddha, oftentimes students will start in a foundational program rather than a program like this, but it's fine. New students come here all the time and they learn and develop their understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. And I have a way of teaching that, even though this is kind of a little bit more advanced things that the Buddha is teaching, I have a way of teaching it to kind of bring you along so that you can understand some of the foundational teachings and understand what we're talking about in studying as part of this. So I'd like to welcome all of you again and invite you to join for meditation. If you'd like to meditate, you can either do this sitting in a chair like you are, or some people like to sit on the floor. It's totally up to you. It's your choice. If you're sitting on the floor, usually we have a cushion under our rear, sometimes multiple cushions to get the hips up in the air. This lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. If you're in a chair, oftentimes people will just put their feet flat on the floor, or they'll cross at their ankles lightly. Essentially, you'd like your lower body to be nice and comfortable. You're not interested in having any obstruction of the circulation or anything like this, because you like your lower body to be comfortable. Then the hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and then he put this into his lap. And if this is comfortable for you, you could do this, but not everybody's going to necessarily find that comfortable. So you'd like to find what's comfortable and what works for you. So some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Essentially, the lower body and the hands and arms should be completely relaxed and comfortable. The upper body is erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be inactive or lethargic. Or if you were real uptight and rigid, the mind would have a tendency to be overactive and uptight. So you're not interested in being slouched or real rigid, but in the middle where the upper body is erect to keep the mind attentive and alert. The way that we start our meditation is I start with some chanting. These chants are in the Pali language, and
we do them in order to ease the mind into meditation. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting in order to remember the teachings because he taught orally and nothing was written down during his lifetime. So every 2 weeks, they would chant in order to commit the teachings to memory. And then by the time he died, they understood exactly what he taught because they had been reciting it for so many years that they were able to write down the teachings after he died. These chants are on a laminated sheet on the table over there. If you would like to see the chants and chant along, you're welcome to. There's a laminated sheet that has the Pali language that you can see using English characters so you can see what's being chanted. And then there's the English translation as well. So you'll be able to see what we're actually chanting. There's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a rite or ritual or ceremony or worship when we're chanting. It's not prayer or anything like that. It's just a way to ease the mind into meditation and out of meditation. After the chanting, I'll provide some guidance to teach you how to actually meditate while we're actually meditating. And then there'll be a period of quiet where we'll just all be meditating together. And then I'll come out of the meditation with some chanting as well to help ease us out of meditation. And then we'll go from there. So if you guys need anything to make yourself comfortable, like a mat or the laminated sheet, it's up to you. Feel free to get whatever you like in order to make yourself comfortable during the meditation. Yeah, we have plenty of cushions, and those cushions that are wrapped in plastic, they're just brand new. If you need those, you can unwrap them from the plastic. We have plenty of stuff for you guys. By the way, how many of you guys, this is your first time coming to a temple to learn Buddhist teachings? How many of you guys? A few? Okay. All right, great. Well, welcome. Pleased to meet you guys. We'll be talking about those teachings here after we do the meditation, because the meditation is part of the training of the mind. This is what the Buddha taught. It's how to train the mind. All right, so with your lower body and hands and arms comfortable and your upper body erect, we'll just go ahead and do the chanting, and then afterwards I'll provide you some guidance in the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Bhutang Mahakewanhang Apivateyami Savakhato Mahakewata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero
โต
Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatava manusanam Voto Bhagavati. With the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's fine. This is your practice. Wherever you get to your next inhale, just breathe in gradually through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Just use my voice as guidance, just reminding you to breathe in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. And whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาควาพุทธังมหาควันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะควาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, this was just a brief little meditation just here at the beginning of the class, but typically what students are doing are building up their meditation practice over the course of their life and building that up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more per session. But it usually takes 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that point. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in order to get to enlightenment. There's other things you need besides meditation in order to get to enlightenment. That's why he taught for 45 years. But meditation is a primary training with all the other trainings that he taught as part of his life. So this Pali Canon and English study group that we're currently in, this 1.5-year program, we're actually in volume 7, which of this book series is titled Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. So you're going to be seeing some words from the Buddha about meditation today and about how he actually taught meditation. And the way that the Buddha teaches is very clear, very concise, very precise. You don't need to interpret his words or try to figure out what he said. You can actually read his teachings and understand it, but it's really helpful to have a guide, someone that can help you along to understand the teachings. But then you're encouraged to learn those teachings, to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and to practice them. There's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that is about belief. You should never believe the teachings of the Buddha. Belief isn't going to help you get to enlightenment. Let's just have a little bit of an introduction to the path to enlightenment and what enlightenment is before we get started with our study group here. What enlightenment is this is a mental state that the mind experiences, where the mind moves to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, where it no longer experiences even the slightest displeasure. All anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these discontent feelings in others are completely eliminated from the enlightened mind. The enlightened mind is focused, has concentration, clarity, and deep memory. The mind experiences not even a bad mood. You're just always in a good mood. Your personal and professional relationships really blossom because you no longer have the harshness and roughness that the unenlightened mind experiences. So moving to this enlightened mental state is one of the best things that could ever happen for your life, because as you apply time, effort, energy, and diligence to learning and practicing and developing your practice, you can experience the liberation of mind where you no longer have these strong feelings that are burdening the mind and keeping it in this disgruntled, agitated, irritated state that it sometimes experiences. By the time you get to enlightenment, all of that has been eliminated from the mind. In order to get to enlightenment, as I mentioned, you're not believing the teachings and hoping that someday something good will happen for you. Instead, you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false, and then you're practicing his teachings in order to transform the mind. Essentially, what he discovered is that there's these 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind, and when you eradicate the mind of these 10 pollutions, then the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind can shine through. But as long as these pollutions are in the mind will be hindered, and it will experience things like stress and anxiety and boredom and loneliness and anger and sadness and all these other discontent feelings. But when you eradicate these pollutions from the mind through training it, then you can experience this freedom from the strong feelings, the peace and the joy. The enlightened mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently for the rest of this life. You'll never again experience anger or sadness or any of those other discontent feelings. It's impossible for an enlightened mind to experience those feelings. So it's studying the teachings of the Buddha and learning them, reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then practicing them that will help you acquire wisdom. This wisdom is then in the mind, and now you'll make wiser and wiser decisions that'll lead to wholesome outcomes. Because as long as you lack wisdom, you'll make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. And that's what the unenlightened mind is experiencing, is that we lack a certain amount of wisdom in the unenlightened state. So we will make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But gaining wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing, now you can make wise decisions. One of those wise decisions is to meditate. That's one of the wise decisions that you can make that will help you on your journey in life. Because whenever you're struggling in life, whenever you're experiencing difficulties in the mind, it's just because the mind lacks certain wisdom. There's certain wisdom that the mind doesn't have yet. So you encounter a certain situation and then you struggle and you have difficulties. But you can overcome those struggles and difficulties through acquiring wisdom. And that's why people might come to the temple or consult with a teacher, read the teachings of the Buddha, study his teachings in order to acquire wisdom, but they're never believing his teachings. So as we go today, you're going to see a bunch of words of the Buddha that are based on the breathing mindfulness meditation, because the words of the Buddha are assembled in 45 large volumes of books. They're about, maybe 10 centimeters thick, about 6 inches thick. There are 45 volumes of them. And it would take you many, 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 many years to read all of them. And there's a lot of repetition in there. And by and large, they're kind of inaccessible to the average person because it's so costly to print out all of those books. So this book series that I share that's available to you at no cost, it consolidates these teachings into 13 books. And then you can download them for free. You can take the file and go print it, or you can get printed versions here at the temple, or you can order them on Amazon. You can then learn his teachings and be able to see the truth for yourself, that these teachings indeed lead to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful and joyful for the rest of this life. Do you guys have any questions on anything that I just shared so far? No? Okay, let me just check online here. Okay, we don't have any questions online either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the Pali Canon and English study group where we'll study the words of the Buddha. This is just the source file for these books. And then I'll invite you guys either here at the temple or online. If you guys would like to volunteer to read, all you need to do is raise your hand, and we have microphones. You don't need to be shy. That's part of the way to get over your shyness, right? An enlightened being is not going to be shy. So one of the ways to get over your shyness is to put the mind in the situation that it might feel uncomfortable with. So if you're uncomfortable with reading or being in the public or talking on a microphone, that's even more reason to go ahead and do it so that your mind can overcome that and not allow the mind to sit in its shyness, but move it past that. So if you guys would like to volunteer, you can just raise your hand. There's microphones there. And those of you guys online, if you would like to read, you're welcome to raise your hand electronically, and I'll see that. And then everyone here at the temple will be able to hear you reading. So we're going to start with chapter 21 of volume 7. Okay, is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this? Shaking your head no. Oh, okay. Well, whatever you'd like to try, this is a great time for you to try. There's some people here that join regularly. They're just waiting to see if you guys would like to volunteer first before they volunteer. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Whatever. You go ahead and pick up a mic there. There's a little button on the front. You can turn it on. For those of you guys that have English as your second language, not only do you get to learn Buddhism, but you get to learn English too. You can practice your English. You get 2 benefits for the price of 1, or for no price at all, right?
Is it working?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Briefing mindfulness meditation, well established, knowing thoughts and impulses don't exist. Remain focused, monks, on fullness in the body. Have mindfulness of in and out breathing well established in front of you. Remain focused on the inconsistency of all untruths. For one who remains focused on the fullness of the body, the obsession with passion for the property of beauty is abandoned. For one who has mindfulness of in and out breathing well established in front of oneself, annoying thoughts and impulses don't exist. For one who remains focused on the inconsistency of all untruths, ignorance, unknowing of true reality is abandoned, clear wisdom arises. Focusing on fullness in the body, mindful of in and out breathing, seeing the stilling of all untruths, dedicated always, he is a monk who sees clearly. From that he is there liberated, a master of direct knowledge, experience, at peace. He is a wise one gone beyond bondage.
All right, thank you very much. So here, this is a chapter where the Buddha is talking about certain aspects of meditation and some of the benefits. There's other chapters that we've already studied in this book that is going through a lot of the details of breathing mindfulness meditation and some really big significant ones. Here towards the end of this book, he's going into some of the more minor ones, but really still very important, very significant for your meditation practice. So here he says monks, essentially remain focused on foulness of the body. He teaches this in order to help us to overcome our sexual cravings, our desires, our longing and yearning, our lust. Because oftentimes what the mind has is we have this lust or this insatiable, unquenchable thirst potentially for sexual contact. And as long as we have that, then the mind can't remain permanently peaceful and joyful, because there's going to be times where you can have sexual contact, but there's going to be times where you can't. and you're going to be very discontent during that time where you want to have sexual contact and you can't. So ultimately, by the time someone gets to enlightenment, they will no longer have sexual contact. They would have eliminated that from the mind. But everybody's at a different place in their journey to enlightenment. For some people, that's going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now, potentially. But what you do is you do all the work on the path to enlightenment to get you moving in a certain direction. And then you can get to the first or second stage of enlightenment. And from there, an individual might still maintain sexual contact because they're still working on certain sensual pleasures or sensual desire that's in the mind. And then when they're ready, at whatever point, maybe they have a partner, maybe they've had a family or something like this, they might decide that they're ready to let go of sexual contact. And when a person makes that choice, there's a certain meditation that you can do to observe the foulness of the body. And this helps one to see true reality. Because one of the reasons why we want sexual contact is because we don't see true reality. We do all these things to the physical body to make it attractive with our hair, our clothing, our jewelry. Some of us might wear makeup or other things like this. And we do this in order to make ourselves attractive to other people and that they would potentially be interested in having sexual contact with us, which ultimately pleases our senses and then pleases the mind and gives this pleasure to the body and to the mind. But by meditating on the foulness of the body, the pus, the blood, the tears, the feces, the urine, all these different things that, if somebody had their skin ripped off their body, you probably wouldn't be interested in having sex with that person. But because we have this outer shell of skin, the body looks somewhat attractive to us at different times in our life and depending on how an individual looks. So there's this meditation that if somebody has a lot of sexual craving and they're trying to bring that down to a minimum, maybe just have one partner, maybe they have a lot of different partners or a lot of craving and they're trying to bring that down to one, they can do that through this meditation. Or if someone has sexual contact with a partner and they've decided that they're going to let go of sexual contact, there's a meditation to train the mind to be able to see true reality of the human body and then be able to overcome any sexual cravings that the mind might be having. So here you see that the Buddha is talking about having mindfulness of the in and out breaths well established in front of you. That's what we were doing when we were meditating. When I first started you guys out, I got you acquainted with the breath first. This breathing mindfulness meditation, you would like to focus on the breath and start becoming aware of the breath, because the breath is the present moment. And by focusing the mind on the breath, you're bringing the mind into the present moment, where if the mind is typically meditating or in daily life, it typically would like to be in the past or wants to be in the future. It's not interested in being in the present moment. So by training the mind to focus on the breath during meditation, it comes more and more into the present moment. And now you can have focus and concentration and clarity, because as long as the mind's in the past or in the future, if it can't stay in the present moment focusing on a certain conversation that you're having, you're losing the ability to benefit from that conversation. Whereas if your mind is in the conversation and you're thinking about the past or the future, you're not gaining the benefit from that actual conversation. And then notice he says, remain focused on the inconsistency of all untruths. The Buddha is always encouraging people to seek out the truth and see the truth, because when you see the truth, then you'll understand what is true and what is false. When we have beliefs, we don't know what's true or false. We're just believing something. And this is one of the reasons why it's easy for the mind to get shaken up in the unenlightened state. It wavers, it shakes, and it's unsteady and uncalm because it doesn't know the truth. But as you learn the teachings of the Buddha and you reflect on those to independently verify them, and then you practice them, more and more you start to understand the truth and you have wisdom, and now your mind is steady and stable. What you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're awakening to what we call the natural laws of existence. These are the natural laws that the Buddha described during his lifetime that the unenlightened mind is unaware of. This is why it struggles in the unenlightened state and it has difficulties, because it's unaware of these natural laws of existence. And the Buddha's teachings are explaining to you what those natural laws of existence are, so that then as you learn you reflect, to independently verify, and you practice, you'll see the truth for yourself, and you can gain wisdom, and you'll be able to see the certain untruths in the world. And then as your mind awakens more and more to the truth or to wisdom, then you'll have the wisdom you need to make wise decisions in the world without the struggles and difficulties. The enlightened mind is completely at ease. Again, never even agitated or irritated, not even the slightest bad mood, because the mind has been fully purified. The mind no longer has those pollutions, and now fully awake to the natural laws of existence, you can make wise decisions in your life, and you'll find that life can be very fulfilling and very satisfying, very straightforward. Where in the unenlightened state, with the pollutions in the mind, life can be very difficult and it can be a real struggle. There's some other things that he's talking about here. Again, he's going through the foulness of the body again. He's talking about how when you're developing mindfulness of the in and out breaths, well established, that there's not these annoying thoughts and impulses, right? So as you develop your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation and you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, that's what I'm describing, is that there isn't even the slightest agitation or the slightest bad mood, where sometimes you might be in a public space, you might see somebody and you're just kind of irritated or annoyed by maybe the way they look or things that they're doing or the way that they're conducting themselves. You might just be kind of agitated or annoyed because you want things to be done your way. When you get your cravings, desires, attachments fulfilled, meaning the wants, the expectations that you have, when they get fulfilled, you get pleasant feelings, you get happy or excited. But when people don't do things the way you want, then you'll get frustrated or irritated or annoyed. This is what the unenlightened mind is doing. It's basing its inner feelings on some external condition or some condition that exists in the world. You see something you like and that's agreeable to you, you get pleasant feelings like happiness or excitement. You see something in the world that you don't like and that you disagree with, and you get painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. But you can overcome that, training the mind to no longer base its inner feelings on some impermanent condition. There's all this impermanence around us, but yet the mind is craving and longing, yearning, wanting things to be permanent, wanting things to be a certain way. And as long as the mind is continuing to do that, it will experience conditioned feelings, which means the mind goes up and down and up and down. But you can transform the mind so that it no longer does that. It just needs to be trained. And that's where the Buddha is talking here as he gets to this next one, where he says, for one who remains focused on the inconsistency of all untruths, ignorance or the unknowing of true reality is abandoned. Clear wisdom arises. Because when you see the truth about what's going on in your mind, with the unenlightened mind basing its inner feelings on some condition, and you can receive the wisdom of how to train the mind to no longer base its inner feelings on some impermanent condition, now you can overcome those struggles. You can get rid of this unknowing of true reality, or this delusion or confusion or this misunderstanding or these misperceptions that the mind has, and now you can overcome that and get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. One of the biggest untruths that the mind has in the unenlightened state is it thinks that your anger is being caused by somebody else, or your frustration is being caused by somebody else or some external thing or some situation. Someone might think, you are making me angry, or you are frustrating me, or that is annoying me. But when you see true reality, your mind is actually causing these feelings itself. That's the reason why you can eliminate your anger. You can eliminate your frustration and your irritation, because your mind is what's causing it. If everybody else is causing you to be angry, that means you need a training program to train everybody in the world to do things your way. Because as soon as somebody doesn't do things your way, you'll get angry. And that's very difficult, to train 8 billion people to do things your way and have them remember that. Right? It would be very challenging to accomplish that goal. So you can train just one mind, which is your mind. And if you train your mind to not base its inner feelings on some external thing or some condition, then you can get to peace and you can get to joy. You can get to liberation. But as long as this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality is in there, and there's many aspects of this that are in the mind as part of the unenlightened mind, one of the primary ones is this misunderstanding that the unenlightened mind has, which it thinks other people are causing you to be frustrated. And then you'll either push that person away thinking that that's going to solve the problem, or you'll become bitter and harsh and hostile towards that person with your speech or your actions, and then that person will choose to leave out of your life, or you'll put your expectations on people and try to control people to do things your way. And as long as your mind is misunderstanding what the problem is, as long as it keeps thinking that it's this external thing is the problem, you'll keep either pushing people away, being bitter and harsh, or putting your expectations on people. But when you can see true reality, start eradicating this ignorance, and you can start seeing the truth and wisdom that your mind is causing its own discontent feelings because of this craving, this longing, this yearning, this wanting things to be your way. When you can see the truth in it, which is called the Four Noble Truths, there's a specific teaching that a beginning student would learn to understand this. When you can see the truth in this, then you can actually fix it, because you'll know what the real problem is. But if you don't know what the real problem is, if you keep falsely believing that it's something external, then you won't ever be able to actually solve the problem. So the Buddha is explaining here that if you remain focused on these inconsistency and all untruths, meaning you seek out wisdom, you don't believe the teachings, you learn, you reflect to independently verify, and you practice, then you can see the truth and gain wisdom. And then you won't experience these annoying thoughts and impulses. You'll have this clear wisdom arise in the mind. And then eventually he's saying some other things here, but then eventually he gets to, from that, he is there liberated. Right? Liberated is freedom of mind, freedom from strong feelings. As long as the mind is unenlightened with certain pollutions, there's not freedom in the mind. The mind is bound up. That's what he's talking about here at the end. He says he is a wise one gone beyond bondage. The mind is bound up in the unenlightened state with these pollutions, where somebody can just say something and you get agitated, or you get frustrated, you get irritated. Just at the snap of a finger, your mind can become agitated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. The mind is bound up. But by the time one gains wisdom and fully trains their mind, they're a wise one who has gone beyond this bondage, that there's nothing that can shake up the enlightened mind, that the mind is free, it's liberated, it has freedom from these strong feelings, it's experiencing peace and joy. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Any questions? All right, looks like we have a question here on Zoom. Let me take a look. Sure, Max. I see Max is offering to keep a lookout for Facebook and YouTube. Feel free to do that, Max, if you'd like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so let's move on to the next chapter. This is chapter 22. Is there someone who would like to read this? Sure. Yeah, if you guys would like to pass those mics around, and you can keep it with you too, and then just pass it around. There's more than one. If the light's on, it's working.
Breathing mindfulness meditation, the Tathagata's dwelling. Monks, if wanderers of other communities ask you, in what dwelling, friends, did the perfectly enlightened one generally dwell during the rain's retreat? Being asked thus, you should answer those wanderers thus: during the rain's residence, friends, the perfectly enlightened one generally resided in the concentration or by mindfulness of breathing, that is, breathing mindfulness meditation. Here, monks, mindful I breathe in, mindful I breathe out. When breathing in long, I know I breathe in long. When breathing out long, I know I breathe out long. When breathing in short, I know I breathe in short. When breathing out short, I know I breathe out short. I know experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. I know experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. I know calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. I know calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. I know experiencing joy, I will breathe in. I know experiencing joy, I will breathe out. I know experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. I know experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. I know experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. I know experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. I know calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. I know calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. I know experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. I know experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. I know gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. I know gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. I know concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. I know concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. I know liberating the mind, I will breathe in. I know liberating the mind, I will breathe out. I know reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. I know reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. I know reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. I know reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. I know reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. I know reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. I know reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. I know reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. If anyone, monks, speaking rightly, could say of anything, it is noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling, the Tathagata's dwelling. It is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, that one could rightly say this. Monks, those monks who are trainees, who have not attained their mind's ideal, who dwell aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage, that is enlightenment, for them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, leads to the destruction of the taints. Those monks who are arahants, whose taints are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, completely destroyed the fetters of existence, those completely liberated through final knowledge, wisdom. From them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, leads to a peaceful dwelling in this very life and to mindfulness and clear comprehension. If anyone, monks, speaking rightly, could say of anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling, the Tathagata's dwelling, is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, that one could rightly say this.
All right, thank you, Kushi. So, going back up here to the top, let's first talk about this word Tathagata. This is how the Buddha referred to himself. When he referred to himself, he would call himself the Tathagata, which today we think that this word means one who's discovered the truth or one who shares the truth. He very rarely referred to himself as a Buddha or the Buddha. He did occasionally because he needed to help people understand what a Buddha is, and that's what he taught as part of his teachings over 2,500 years ago. But he most frequently referred to himself as the Tathagata, one who shares the truth or one who has discovered the truth. Then here, what he's describing is to his students, he's saying, monks, if wanderers of other communities ask you. So during the lifetime of a Buddha, we might think that everybody studied with a Buddha, because if a Buddha existed during your lifetime, you'd probably be interested in studying with that person. But there's no outward characteristic of knowing that this person is an actual Buddha or not. There's certain criteria to know whether a Buddha is a Buddha, but there's not a characteristic of the physical body that everybody can determine without any uncertainty that this person is indeed a Buddha. But there's these three criteria that we know about that one can identify that a Buddha is a Buddha. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, he was one teacher of many teachers who were sharing teachings. So there were other teachers who were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But of course, the Buddha knew that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. So he was dedicated and diligent to sharing his teachings for 45 years. From the age of 35 until 80, he shared his teachings into the world. And then over time, more and more people understood that his teachings do lead to enlightenment because they were experiencing enlightenment. They knew what it felt like to be angry and sad and frustrated. And then as their mind evolved beyond that, and they were experiencing 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of complete peace and joy, they know that they had experienced enlightenment because their mind was no longer experiencing those discontent feelings. So the Buddha is saying to his students that if these other students of other teachers should ask you, in what dwelling, friends, did the perfectly enlightened one generally dwell during the rains retreat? There's a 3-month period during the year where everybody would stay inside their temple, because if you can imagine the number of people that were actually studying with the Buddha, there was thousands and thousands of people. And during that time frame, they didn't have well-defined sidewalks and roads the way that we do now with property lines and things like this. So when you're traveling from one village to the other, you would walk through people's land. And during the rainy season, if you were walking through people's land and there's thousands of people moving all about the earth, then you would destroy their crops. And now the seeds being planted in the field and people destroying them, now we would struggle to have food in the world if there wasn't enough food to feed everyone. So he taught his ordained practitioners to stay inside the temple for 3 months out of the year during this rainy season so that they wouldn't destroy the crops and it wouldn't affect us in a negative way where we would lack the ability to sustain ourselves with food. So the people might ask, where did the Buddha reside during the rainy retreat? What temple did he reside in? Well, the Buddha is saying where he resided is in breathing mindfulness meditation, that he was doing breathing mindfulness meditation during the time of the rainy retreat. That's what he was doing, was training his mind. Of course, he was already enlightened, but even enlightened beings continue to meditate, because if you've developed your mind with this practice of breathing mindfulness meditation, and it's had this significant impact to your life where you've seen the peace, the calm, the serenity, the contentedness, the joy, the focus, the concentration, the clarity of mind, the deep memory, your personal, professional relationships have blossomed and improved. You're not even in a bad mood anymore. You're not going to just stop doing that. You're going to continue to do it. Because while you get to enlightenment and you can actually see that the mind's enlightened, as you continue to train the mind, there's higher and higher degrees of concentration that you can experience beyond once the mind actually has eliminated discontentedness. There's additional concentration that you can develop, and the meditation is going to help you to be able to do that. So he's explaining that he resided in breathing mindfulness meditation during the rainy retreat. And then he's providing guidance of how he actually meditates. This is his guidance of what he actually did during his meditation. So what I share in terms of guidance is a consolidation of all of this so that you can learn how to meditate and then you can actually do it. You don't need to think about each one of these statements while you're meditating, but instead it's like your parents taught you to brush your teeth. And when you first learned to brush your teeth, you had to be very aware of every in and out stroke because we were developing our motor skills and our ability to be able to brush our teeth. But now when we brush our teeth, we just slap on the toothpaste and then boom, 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 and we brush our teeth. It's quite straightforward. We don't even think about the in and out strokes anymore. We just do it, right? Because we've been doing it for so long now. Same thing is when you first start your meditation, when you first start learning meditation, you need that guidance from a teacher like I did when we first started. But then over time, as you understand how to meditate, you just do it. You don't need to be thinking about all these things. So I've consolidated this guidance in a way that you can learn it as part of your journey to enlightenment. And then the more you do it, you can just do it. You don't have to be so aware of all the various facets of meditation because you just know to focus on the breath. And when the mind moves off the breath, you notice that sooner and sooner and you cut it off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. If during meditation your mind was bombarded with thoughts, this is very normal for someone who's just starting to meditate. Or if you notice that you indulged in a thought, maybe you had a thought and you followed it for a period of time. And then 2 minutes, 3 minutes in, you realize like, oh my goodness, I'm meditating. And then you remember to bring the mind back to the breath. This is normal. This is what tends to happen when you first start training. But over time, you get better and better at noticing when there is a thought sooner and sooner, and you're able to easily cut it off sooner and sooner. And this is where the mind is becoming more and more trained. And now you have these qualities in daily life to be able to then practice in daily life, where as unwholesome thoughts are arising in the mind during your daily life, you can cut those off and let them go. If you've been training your mind this way in meditation. But if you haven't been training in meditation, when anger or frustration or irritation or any of these other discontent feelings are arising, you wouldn't be able to cut them off and let them go, because your mind hasn't been trained to do that. So that's what the meditation is helping you to do, is develop mindfulness or awareness of mind, concentration, so you can have focus and clarity, but then be able to easily let go and come back to the breath and come back to the breath and come back to the breath. So if 20, 30, 50 times during your meditation, you had to train the mind to let go and come back to the breath, wonderful, because now your mind is better trained to let go. So in daily life, with that mindfulness or awareness of mind, you'll notice sooner and sooner that the mind is about to become frustrated or irritated, and then you can cut that off and let it go. And eventually you train the mind so well that irritation and frustration doesn't even arise anymore, because you've eliminated the conditions that are causing it to arise. But that takes time for you to gradually build up over time. So here, these are the words of the Buddha where he's explaining how he actually meditated and the things that he did. And then he's talking here more. He's saying that for someone who's training and hasn't attained their mind's ideal, meaning they haven't attained enlightenment yet, who dwell aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage, meaning they're aspiring to get to enlightenment. If they're aspiring to get to enlightenment and they're developing this concentration in their breathing mindfulness meditation, which leads to the destruction of the taints. These are the 10 fetters. These are those 10 pollutions that I talk about. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be having a class where I'm going to go through each of the 10 fetters one by one. I'm going to explain them to you, what they are, and what symptoms they're causing in your mind, and actually how to eliminate these 10 pollutions or defilements, or we call them fetters. What a fetter is like a shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball. It's like keeping a prisoner trapped. So these fetters are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state, where it can't experience the radiance and the brightness and the joy of the enlightened mind, because the mind is polluted. So when you get rid of these pollutions, when you get rid of these fetters, now the mind is having this unsurpassed security from bondage. It's no longer bound up like a prisoner, where the mind can get agitated and irritated. So the Buddha is explaining that breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the elimination of these 10 fetters. It's one of the tools that you'll need on your journey to enlightenment in order to eradicate these pollutions from the mind. He says those monks who are arahants, what an arahant is this is the 4th stage of enlightenment. This is an enlightened being. This is the word that they use to refer to somebody who's eliminated the 10 fetters. So if somebody is an arahant, they've eliminated the 10 fetters. Today, we might just call that person an enlightened being. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would refer to them as an arahant, because they were speaking a different language. So we still use this because people tend to use that phrase when or that term when they're referring to the 4th stage of enlightenment. They'll call it arahant or arahantship, which means an enlightened being, someone who's eliminated all 10 fetters. So here he says, those monks who are arahants, whose taints are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden. The burden is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, yearning. When the mind's chasing after the objects of its affection, it's a real burden. What the unenlightened mind does is it chases and chases and chases, and it thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind keeps chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing and trying to get to this object. And if you get what you want, you get those pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want, you get those painful feelings. So that's what he's saying about laying down the burden, because by the time you've purified the mind of those 10 fetters, you've laid down this burden of having to chase around all these unattainable goals, perhaps, or this unquenchable thirst of chasing after your cravings. They've reached their own goal, completely destroyed the fetters, those completely liberated through final knowledge. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have attained what's called final knowledge. The mind will fully understand the path to enlightenment. And then he says, for them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to a peaceful dwelling in this very life, and to mindfulness and clear comprehension. What he's starting to talk about is enlightenment. That's what breathing mindfulness meditation leads to, is it leads to this peaceful dwelling where the mind can reside in this peaceful mental state, this joyful mental state where it never experiences any discontentedness any longer. And then he says, if anyone, monks, speaking rightly could say anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling. The Tathagata's dwelling is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation. That one could rightly say this. So that's where the Buddha is going to train. That's what he's going to be doing during the raining retreat, is meditating, right? You're inside, it's raining outside. Maybe there's not much going on inside. You could either search social media, you could be watching TV, you could be doing any number of different things, but why not introduce some meditation into your life, right? And build up your meditation practice. This will be really beneficial because that's what will lead to the peace and joy of the enlightened mind, is practicing meditation. So any questions on this particular chapter? For those of you guys online, you can either put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next chapter. Here, this is chapter 23. Is there someone who would like to read this? You guys seem very shy today. Let it go, let it go. How about you guys online? Bruce, Max, you guys would like to read?
I could read, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go for it, Max. We can hear you.
Okay. Through breathing mindfulness meditation, no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. At Savatthi, now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahakapina was sitting not far from the perfectly enlightened one, with his legs folded crosswise, holding his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. The perfectly enlightened one saw him sitting nearby, with his legs folded crosswise, his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. Having seen him, he addressed the monks thus: Monks, do you see any shaking or trembling in this monk's body? Venerable Sir, whenever we see that venerable one, whether he is sitting in the midst of the community or sitting alone in private, we never see any shaking or trembling in that venerable one's body. Monks, that monk gains at will, without trouble or difficulty, that concentration through the development of cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And what concentration is it through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, has been developed and cultivated, that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And how, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, developed and cultivated so that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? Here, monks, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him, just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body.
All right, so that repeats the same as it did in that previous chapter.
Do you want me to read he trains thus?
Sure.
Okay. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe out.
Hello there, gentlemen. Can you hear us?
Oh,
Sorry, sorry about that. There are so many little pieces that need to be in place in order for this live streaming to take place. I forgot to plug in the computer.
oh, the battery died.
Yeah, the battery died. Okay.
Okay, continuing. It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation, has been developed and cultivated in this way that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, the Buddha is providing us the same guidance of breathing mindfulness meditation, and at different times in his teachings, he's explaining the benefits of breathing mindfulness meditation. And in this particular chapter, he's explaining about this shaking and trembling in the body. As you're meditating, you might notice at different times during your practice that there's a bit of shaking, that as the mind's letting go and you're training the mind to let go in meditation, there can be shaking or trembling in the body at different times. But by the time you train your mind fully enough, you'll get over that hump and you'll notice that the mind will be still and quieted. There'll still be occasional thoughts. Even when the mind is enlightened, there'll still be occasional thoughts, but the mind will be still and quieted. And you'll notice the same thing about the body is that the body will be quite still, that it won't have the shaking and trembling. And that's what he's essentially talking about here. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Max, you said you're looking at YouTube and Facebook. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next chapter. Chapter 24. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, yeah, go for it.
The final in-breaths and out-breaths are known. Rahula, develop meditation on mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation. When mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. And how is mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit? Here, Rahula, a monk gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful he breathes in, ever mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long, or breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows I breathe in short, or breathing out short, he knows I breathe out short. And rest is repeated as chapter 1. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. Rahula, that is how mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths are known as they cease, not unknown.
Okay, thank you, Koshi. So here, the Buddha is describing another benefit, which he's described many in this book so far, but he's describing this benefit of knowing the in-breaths and out-breaths, because as you're training in meditation, you're being aware of the breath in and out. And throughout your day, you'll be aware at different times of your breath breathing in and out. But then he's talking about that even by the time you get to your death, your final in-breath and your final out-breath, you will know that if you have been doing breathing mindfulness meditation throughout your life, you'll know your final in and final out-breath. Every single one of us need to die. There's none of us that are going to live permanently, that we understand this universal truth of impermanence, that beings are being born, so therefore because we were born, we need to die. And as part of doing breathing mindfulness meditation, among all the other benefits that he's already been explaining throughout all of his discourses, he's saying, yes, your final in-breaths and out-breaths, you will know what those are. Any questions on this one? Yes, ma'am. If you could use the microphone to ask your question, that would be great. Right there, the people online won't be able to hear you unless you use the microphone. Yeah, thank you so much. There's a button and you just turn it on, and as long as the light's on, it'll be working. Yep.
So just I'd like to make sure about the title, the final in-breath and the out-breath are known. Means so when we finish meditate, just breath in and breath out. What that mean?
What he's referring to here is your final in-breath and out-breath, meaning prior to death. Your very last in-breath and your very last out-breath. He said you will know that that is your very last breath. The Buddha himself, when he died, he knew that he was going to die. He let people know 3 months ahead before he actually was going to die. That's how enlightened he was. He knew the future in certain situations of things that were going to happen before they happened. So he knew that he was going to die 3 months before, and he knew his final in-breaths and out-breaths too, because he delivered his very last teaching. He delivered a teaching and then he died. So that's what he's sharing, is that you can know your very last in-breath and out-breath, essentially knowing the moment of your death if you practice breathing mindfulness meditation, which can actually help you to not have such fear of death, because oftentimes people fear death, but by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't fear death. And knowing your final in-breaths and out-breaths and knowing when death is occurring, it can help you. There's other things as well, but that can help you to not have fear of death.
Always described when the Buddha dead, passed away. So,
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
So the title, so the final in-breath and the out-breath are known, means it's described when the Buddha.
This here isn't describing when he passed away. Here he's just describing that if you practice breathing mindfulness meditation, you will then know your final in-breaths and out-breaths when you get ready to die. But then what I added into it is I added that he himself did know his final in-breaths and out-breaths, because you can see it when they documented his death. You can see that he talked 3 months before. He explained to his students he was going to die in 3 months. And he died in 3 months, just like he said. And then you can see his final words, that he delivered a teaching. And then when he got to the end of that final teaching, boom, he died. Right.
Thank you. I didn't know at all about Buddha's story or in Japanese. So thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Let me know.
Yeah, great. Pleased that you asked a question. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 25. And then after this, we'll take a nice little break. Is there someone who would like to read this? Sure. Yeah, please go ahead. This is for your guys' benefit, right?
One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit I am. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of he will be virtuous, practicing moral conduct. One who resides restrained by the training guidelines, possessed of wholesome conduct and resolving difficult situations, seeing danger in the slightest faults. Having undertaken the training guidelines, will train in them. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will get to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is, talk on elimination of desires, on contentment, on solitude, on not getting bound up with others, on arousing energy, on virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom of and vision of liberation. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will arouse energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in effort, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be wise, possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. Having based himself on these 5 things, the monk should develop further another 4 things. 1. The perception of unattractiveness of the body should be developed to abandon lust. 2. Loving kindness should be developed to abandon ill will. 3. Mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness meditation should be developed to cut off thoughts. 4. The perception of impermanence should be developed to eradicate the conceit I am. When one perceives impermanence, the perception of non-self is stabilized. One who perceives non-self eradicates the conceit I am, which is Nibbana, enlightenment in this very life.
All right, thank you very much. So here the Buddha is providing guidance to eradicate what's called the personal existence view and the conceit. These are 2 of the 10 fetters. And like I mentioned, tomorrow I'm going to be teaching the 10 individual fetters. Personal existence view and conceit is what we would refer to as the ego. Here in modern times, we use this word ego. During the lifetime of the Buddha, the word ego didn't exist. And he described it as these 2 separate fetters, which it actually helps to understand the 2 separate fetters of personal existence view and conceit and what the differences of those things are. Well, here he's describing how to essentially eradicate that, which is ultimately by the time he starts talking about the 4 different types of meditations. But at first, what he's guiding individuals to do is to select wholesome friends, companions, and comrades. This is basically the influences that you have in your life. If you have people around you that are into unwholesome things, then you'll tend to do those unwholesome things too. Those are the choices that you're making based on the friends that you've chosen to acquire. But the people that you acquire as friends, if they're into wholesome things, you can be influenced by those as well. You're never interested in judging other people and looking down on them or looking up to people with such admiration that the mind is shaken up and uncalm and unsteady. Instead, you should view all beings as equal, that all of us are equal. It doesn't matter our cultural background, our ethnicity, our gender, our sexual orientation, our job or our role in society. We're all equal. No matter what we do in life, we all are equal. And the more that we see it that way, the better we can relate to everyone around us. But with discernment or wise decision making, there are certain wise decisions that we can make about certain people to associate with. And this is done through wise decision making without looking down on somebody and thinking that they're bad or anything like that, but instead just making wise decisions to realize that if somebody was, say, killing or selling substances that cause heedlessness or doing harmful things in the world, it would be unwise to associate with somebody of that type because it's only a matter of time before those things start affecting you. Or if somebody was into sexual misconduct or lying or speaking harsh and aggressive and hostile and bitter, if you're around this individual, that's going to affect you, that your mind will be influenced by that. So the Buddha guides his students to select wholesome friends and companions as a way of making a wise decision, not as judging another person and looking down on them. And then after he talks about that, he then describes these 4 different types of meditation, which are all 4 types of meditations that I teach as well as part of all the various programs that I share, which is 1, developing the unattractiveness of the body to abandon lust. This is what I was mentioning earlier in our class. Then there's a meditation called loving kindness. This is to help you eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will. This is a certain aspect of the mind that needs to be eliminated in order to get to enlightenment. An enlightened being doesn't experience any anger, hatred, ill will, even the lighter versions of that, like frustration, irritation, annoyance, or agitation. It's completely eliminated in its loving kindness meditation that helps you to be able to accomplish that. Then there's mindfulness of breathing, or breathing mindfulness meditation should be developed to cut off thoughts. That's what this whole book is about, is breathing mindfulness meditation. And that's why you're guided in meditation to cut off and let go of thoughts, bringing the mind back to the breath, which this then gives you a quality of mind that in daily life, you'll be able to cut off and let go of any unwholesomeness that's coming up in the mind. But as long as the mind isn't able to cut off and let go, you wouldn't be able to cut off and let go of something like anger, for example, if it's arising in the mind. And then there's this fourth meditation, which is called the perception of impermanence. I refer to this meditation as the meditation to realize non-self, where you're training the mind to eliminate this conceit of I am, like I am a Buddhist teacher, or I am a American, or I am a father, or I am a husband, or I am. The mind has a certain self-identity that it's holding on to. And as long as it's holding on to that, if you hear things that are agreeable, you'll get pleasant feelings. Like if someone says, all Buddhist teachers are so loving and kind and generous. If I identify as I am a Buddhist teacher, now the mind might experience all these pleasant feelings. But if somebody says something degrading and disparaging about Buddhist teachers, if the mind identifies with I am a Buddhist teacher, now you're going to experience painful feelings as a result of that. So in the unenlightened state, there's certain self-image and certain self-identity that the mind is clinging to and holding on to. And there's a meditation to help you eradicate that. But you need to learn more about the path to enlightenment before you actually move into that. But this is an area of development of the mind, and the Buddha is describing that here through this fourth aspect of meditation. Any questions on this particular chapter, chapter 25? Yes, ma'am. 2 questions. Yep, go ahead.
It I am.
Mm-hmm.
How to, I don't know how to explain. How should we replace I am by something else? Or because if we are not, in the society, how can we live? How can we be? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're eradicating this false belief or this misperception or this confusion that this body or this mind is you. That's one of the problems in the unenlightened mind, is it's clinging to this self-image or this self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. So it's a matter of understanding you perform a certain role in life, but that doesn't define who you are as a person. So sure, someone might say, David is a Buddhist teacher, but my mind doesn't identify with I am a Buddhist teacher. I know that that's the role that I fulfill, that people will view me as fulfilling that role, but my mind doesn't hold on or cling to that as an identity. So there might be a certain job or occupation that you've had in the past, and maybe you have one now. If you allow your mind to cling to this and to define who you are as a person through that job or occupation, if you're doing that job or occupation, you might feel quite fulfilled. But if you lose your job for any reason, you might feel lost, because that's a part of you and you feel like that's part of who you are. So the Buddha teaches this universal truth of non-self, where you start to understand that this body nor this mind is you. It doesn't define who you are, that this body is just physical structures that are constantly changing. And if you cling to this body, then you'll be discontent at some point, right? Like if you see a gray hair, or you see a wrinkle, or you see a mole, or you see a pimple, or get a little bit of fat or something like this, the mind can be shaken up by that because it's thinking that this body is who you are. And the Buddha says, no, this body isn't who you are. And then the same thing with the self-identity in the mind. The mind can easily be shaken up if it's holding on to any particular self-identity, thinking that that's who you are. So it's a matter of fulfilling certain roles and doing certain things in the world that you know are important for you in your life, but not allowing the mind to cling to that as identity of who you are. Mhm.
In the last paragraph where he explains, before the meditations,
Right here?
where he explains possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. What does that mean?
Sure, that's understanding the universal truth of impermanence, that you understand the arising and passing away of conditioned objects, and that all these material things around us are impermanent. This is a core fundamental teaching of the Buddha, is the universal truth of impermanence, and understanding that all these objects around us are impermanent. They arise, they change, and they fade away. If you didn't understand that, then you wouldn't get to understanding the number one problem that he discovered in the mind, which is the mind craves permanence. It wants things to be permanent. So when you have a brand new car and you see a scratch on it, that represents impermanence, and the unenlightened mind craves for this car to look permanently beautiful. And now you get angry and frustrated when you see the scratch on your car. We're not talking about what's right or wrong, whether, the person who scratched your car, whether they've done something wise or unwise, right? It's unwise to scratch someone's car, but the fact is that this car is impermanent. It's going to get a scratch. It's only a matter of time. So if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, when you see impermanence, it's like, okay, well, of course, that makes sense. My car has a scratch on it. Now let me remain calm. Let me remain steady and stable, and let me take some actions here. Should I go talk to the security guard about the CCTV camera? Should I look to see if there's a note? Maybe they left a note for me to say they're going to take responsibility for the scratch. Maybe I'll just go to the garage and get it fixed because I have insurance and insurance will pay for it. Or maybe I don't have insurance and maybe I'll pay for it myself. Whatever it is, you just remain calm and collected, and then you can make wise decisions. Where when we see that scratch, we don't understand the arising and passing away of all conditioned objects, then the mind will get frustrated and irritated and agitated. And then you'll go in and talk to the security guards rough and hostile and aggressive. They won't be interested to help you. Maybe you call the police and you're aggressive and hostile with them, or maybe you go to the garage and you talk bitter and harsh with them. Who knows, right? So if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, when you see the scratch, it's like, of course the car is scratched. It was only a matter of time before that occurred, and there's no reason for my mind to be all upset and agitated about it. And it's the same thing, even an enlightened being can get to the point where when somebody dies in your life, somebody's close to you, you don't have to be shaken up. It's the same thing with the scratch, that when somebody dies, it's not love that's causing the grief and the pain and the misery. It's because the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting grandma or grandpa or mom or dad or brothers and sisters to be permanent, but they are impermanent because they arise and they pass away. And that's what the Buddha is cluing you into here. And he's just saying it in a different way than what he might typically say it. Max, you have a question?
Yeah, on Zoom, Bruce asks, "Teacher, can you please elaborate on what the Buddha meant by not getting bound up with others?"
Yeah, so getting bound up with others is allowing the mind to be affected and influenced by other people. So if you're allowing the mind to get bound up with others, say you're at work, Bruce, and people are gossiping around the water cooler, and now you go to get some water and you hear this gossip and you start jumping in there and gossiping as well. You're now bound up with others. But if you go to that water cooler, you get your water, you hear the gossip, and you just ignore it or walk away or what have you, now you're not getting bound up with others. That's what that means.
Thank you, sir. I guess I have a similar question or situation. So a lot of my coworkers have negative attitudes, and they frequently complain about work, and I find that is affecting my attitude. It seems to be bothering me, I guess. So that would be a similar situation of I'm getting bound up by others.
Yes, you're allowing your mind to get bound up with others because in this situation, when somebody is doing something and you're finding that you're getting annoyed or frustrated or irritated, your mind's craving for those people to be a certain way. And then when they're not that way, you're getting irritated or agitated. So what you would like to do is understand that all these beings in the world, they're making their own independent decisions, their own choices and decisions, and you can't control what they do or don't do. All you can do is control your own mind. So if you get rid of your cravings of wanting people to be a certain way and longing and yearning for that to be a certain way, then when people aren't that way, you can remain peaceful and joyful, because you know that in some situations people are going to do things the way that you do, and in other situations they're not. This is just impermanence, that not everyone's going to permanently do things in the same way as you. So you can get bound up with others if you are choosing to allow your mind to crave and long and yearn to be a certain way, and wanting other people to function in the world a certain way, but instead going to that water cooler if people are gossiping, instead of feeling like I've got to step in here and tell them not to gossip and they shouldn't be gossiping and I don't want to hear any gossip. Instead, you understand that they are making their own decisions and they're going to experience the results of those decisions. And our job as an individual on the path to enlightenment isn't to go out into the world and change other people. It's to change your own mind. As long as you're going around trying to constantly teach other people to do things and they haven't solicited your input or your guidance, your mind is still bound up and you're still trying to, get the world to do things your way. Instead, you can let go and just realize the world's going to function the way it's going to function. It's functioning exactly the way that the Buddha taught, which is it's impermanent, right? And as people choose to do things in a different way as you, understand that that's just impermanence and you don't need to be frustrated or agitated or irritated. Just continue to reside peaceful and joyful, knowing that you're choosing not to gossip in this particular example, and you're not going to be affected because you're choosing not to gossip. So therefore, you can reside peaceful and joyful because of the wisdom to know that you're not gossiping and slandering people.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, Koshi, you have a question?
Follow-up question. So what if someone is gossiping in front of you, to you? Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that? Because you don't tell them not to gossip. And if also you hear that, mm-hmm. it will be your karma. So how to deal with that?
Yes, so it's only your karma with gossip is if you choose to gossip. And if you chose to sit there and continue to listen to it, it can affect your mind in a negative way, right? So that's like your choices. Those are the only two choices you have. Are you going to gossip yourself, or are you going to sit here and continue to listen to the gossip? But you can't control whether this person continues to gossip or not. So in each situation, you might handle it a little bit differently, right? Because there's not just one permanent example of if this happens, do that, right? So in some situations, you might choose to walk away. And that's what you choose to do. In other situations, you might choose to change the subject and just try to move to a different subject. In other cases, like I was recently, a couple of weeks ago, somebody was gossiping around me, and they happened to be gossiping about the king of Thailand. And I said to him, I said, I think you're a really great guy, and I wouldn't be interested in seeing you go to jail. It's kind of unwise to be talking that way. And he's like, yeah, but it's just you and me. It doesn't matter. And I was like, yeah, I understand. So then, he just kept talking and it didn't bother me. I just kept smiling. And I said, it'd be really unfortunate if you went to jail. So in that situation, I was kind of like making a joke and cracking a joke because this guy, he's actually a comedian. He's a professional comedian. So I was trying to crack a little joke with him. So in some cases, he just kept gossiping. I didn't gossip. I didn't say anything negative whatsoever. And I didn't agree with what he was saying, but I didn't have to, right? Because it was impermanence. And then eventually, after he said a few phrases, then I just changed the subject to something else and we were off to the next topic, right? So each situation's a little bit different. If it was somebody I didn't know and it's somebody like this person, I know him fairly well. He's a family friend. We've been around each other for quite a while. His children and my children play together. So I can joke with them. I can play with them. If it's somebody else I don't really know that well, I might have just walked away or more directly changed the subject perhaps. So that's where, as a person with a higher consciousness, you need to look at all the variables and make the decision that's wise in that particular situation. And each situation is going to be a little bit differently. So you shouldn't try to have like one stock answer of the way you handle every single problem or every single challenge that you're encountering, but look at the situation and decide what's best. And if you're choosing not to gossip, wonderful. You're not going to experience any unwholesome karma. And now the only decision is how influential is this gossip going to be to my mind? Do I need to leave? Do I need to change the subject? Can I crack a joke and laugh? And then even still, they're still gossiping. It's still not going to affect my mind. So I can sit here in this conversation and it's still not going to affect the way that this mind thinks. So each situation, depending on who the person is and where you are in your training, you might choose to do something different and unique. All right, great questions, guys. All right, so all of you guys online, we're going to take a break here at the temple. It's about 10 minutes or 12 minutes to 11. If you guys would like to come back and learn some more, let's come back at 5 minutes after 11. That'll give us about a 15, 17-minute break, and then we'll pick it up from there. So all you guys online, if you guys would like to take a break and come back as well, you're welcome to. If you're not coming back from break, then perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes on tomorrow. We have a class where I'm actually going to be teaching for a period of time, and then I'll open up for questions, and I'm teaching. It's a more traditional style of learning. This is more of a study group. And then on Monday, I'm going to be starting the Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course, which is starting at 9 a.m. And it goes from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day, Monday through Friday. And you can come and go out of those courses and any of these classes as you like. It's your own decision. So if you'd like to join either tomorrow or any part of next week, you're always welcome to. You can find the details of these courses on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can see it on the bulletin board here. We have some information about the courses, and you can even talk to me at breaks or after class, and I'll help you as well. So thank you all for joining, and if I see you after break, that's great, and if not, we'll perhaps see you in one of these future classes. So be well, and we'll see you either after break or in a future class. Sawadee krap. to here. All right, so welcome back to all of you guys. We're on chapter 26 of volume 7, and we have a volunteer here to read. If you'd like to go ahead and read this chapter, and then we'll share some teachings afterwards.
Things that lead to the liberation of mind. Megillah, when liberation of mind has not developed, 5 things leads to its development. What 5? First, here, Megillah, a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the first thing that leads to its development. Second, again, a monk is virtuous, practicing moral conduct. He resides restrained by the training guidelines, possessed of wholesome conduct and determination, seeing danger in slightest faults. Having undertaken the training guidelines, he trains in them. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the second thing that leads to its development. Third, again, a monk gets to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is, talk on elimination of desires, on contentment, on solitude, on getting bound up with others, on arousing energy, virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and vision of liberation. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the third thing that leads to its development. Fourth, again, a monk has aroused energy from abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in effort, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the fourth thing that leads to its development. Fifth, again, a monk is wise. He possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the fifth thing that leads to its development. When Megillah, a monk, has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be virtuous, practice of moral conduct, one who resides restrained by the training guidelines will train in them. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will get to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart, that is, talk on elimination of desires, on the wisdom and vision of liberation. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will arouse energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, it can be predicted of him that he will be wise, possessing the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction and discontentedness.
We read this part here in the last chapter, so yeah, we can save our time for not reading that since we've already studied it, but thank you for reading that. So let's look at what the Buddha is talking about here, things that lead to the liberation of mind. He's giving these 5 things. There's other things, of course, but here he's kind of giving some general guidance of what leads to enlightenment. That's what it means to experience liberation of mind. Well, the first one that he emphasizes time and time again in his teachings is developing wholesome friends. Right? Having these wholesome friends, companions, comrades, that's going to help you to move towards enlightenment. And oftentimes people make friends in a community like this. You know, we've got people online, we've got people here, we've got people all over the world that you start meeting that are into wholesome things and developing their mind on the path to enlightenment. And this is a great place to be able to meet wholesome friends and companions and comrades. Then he talks about a student who is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, resides restrained by the training guidelines. What he's talking about here are things like the 5 precepts, or right intention, right speech, right action, that he's providing you this guidance to understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And that if you understand the moral conduct, and why he's teaching these things, that they're not rules, they're not commandments, it's not forced behavior. It's that when you learn and you reflect to independently verify, and then you practice, you can see the truth for yourself, that when you don't lie, this is wise. It helps you in life. That when you don't slander other people, then this is really helpful in your life. When you don't speak harshly, or you don't have frivolous speech, this is part of right speech. When you practice in this way, then you understand that you're experiencing better results in your personal, professional life. So that's why he says here that he resides restrained by the training guidelines, because as you learn that training, you see the truth in it yourself, that the natural law of karma is always there, always working, and you're going to be affected by whatever conduct you have. So when you see the truth in the natural law of karma, not that you believe in it, but you see the truth, that it's actually true, then you will choose yourself to make these wise decisions around your moral conduct. And that's why he says that possessed of wholesome conduct in determination, seeing danger in slightest faults. You can see that for yourself. If you have a certain relationship with somebody and it's going fairly well, if you are harsh, or if you lie, or you're slanderous, or any of those other things about speech, even the slightest fault can cause difficulties in your life because of that natural law of karma. So by the time you've seen the truth of the natural law of karma, you'll see this danger even in the slightest faults. Then number 3, he says, a student will hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life, conducive to opening up the heart. The Buddha tends to talk about the heart as he refers to the mind. Here in Thailand, when you talk about the mind, they will tend to touch their heart. They think about the mind as residing in the heart. And I think that's a very warm, endearing thing to think about. In the West, we tend to point to our head. In other cultures, they think about the mind even being outside the body. They don't even think about it as being part of the actual body. In reality, the mind is intangible. It's non-physical. It can't be touched. The mind isn't the brain, and the brain isn't the mind. These are two different things. The brain is the physical organ. The mind is intangible, non-physical. You can't actually touch it. You can't touch the mind. You can touch the brain, but you can't touch the mind. So we don't really have a definitive place of where the mind exists, because it's not tangible. It's not physical. It doesn't exist any one particular place. And even if we did know, it wouldn't change anything about what we need to do on the path to enlightenment. We still need to train the mind. We still need to purify it. So whether it's in the head, whether it's in the heart, whether it's outside the body or somewhere else, okay, now let's train it and purify it. And that's what the Buddha is getting to. But he'll sometimes relate to the mind as the heart, which I think is a great way to think about it, as all the different associations we have with the heart. So that's what he's describing here. And he's saying that, this talk on the holy life is essentially opening up the heart, talk on eliminating desires, that craving, desire, attachment, on contentment, developing contentment in the mind. And then on solitude, that's like spending time alone and not being afraid or uncomfortable to spend time alone. An individual who's enlightened, they're not going to be uncomfortable when they're alone. They're going to be able to go to the park alone, go to restaurants alone, go to the mall, go to the movies. If right now you're not even doing those things, or even just the thought of doing those things, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'd go out to dinner with myself to a restaurant. You should do that so that you get used to being alone and being in this solitude. Getting bound up with others, which you've already talked about, and these other things here as well that we can talk about as you guys might have questions. And then number 4, he says, a monk has aroused energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in effort, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. So this is having the energy, the motivation, the enthusiasm, the initiative, the willingness to do something. That you see certain unwholesome qualities in the mind, and you have the energy, and you're willing to apply the effort and motivation and enthusiasm to actually eliminate those, and also cultivate the wholesome. This is a very important quality of mind to have. It's called the enlightenment factor of energy. And then number 5 is a monk is wise. He's possessed the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. This is what we were talking about earlier, that you understand you understand the universal truth of impermanence, that things arise, they change, and they fade away. This is what a conditioned object is, the arising and passing away. And this wisdom is noble. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there was noble people or affluent people. There was a very strong caste system in place where there was rich and wealthy people who were considered to be noble. And then there were people who were born with less resources, and they were considered to be a lower part of society. And the Buddha described that everybody can be noble. It's based on your wisdom that you cultivate in the mind. That's what determines whether or not you're noble or not what family you were born into. Because during his lifetime, it was based on the family that you were born into. You were either born into a noble, affluent family or a family who lacked resources, and your life was kind of destined for whatever you experienced as a result of that. But the Buddha taught that everybody can be noble, and it's based on the wisdom that you have in your mind, not where you're actually born. So he's often will refer to the wisdom that he shares as being noble, and it will refer to a student who studies with him as a noble disciple, someone who's studying this wisdom. Leads to complete destruction of discontentedness. That's that conditioned feelings, of conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. That by the time you train your mind to get to enlightenment, doing all these 5 things in addition to others, the Buddha talks about elimination of discontentedness, where the mind's no longer sad or angry, frustrated, or any of these other discontent feelings. When liberation of mind has not developed, this is the 5th thing that leads to its development. So these 5 things are what one would need to cultivate in addition to other aspects of the path. And then he goes into talking about those things in a little bit more elaborate detail. And then ultimately he ends up with these 4 types of meditation that somebody would need to learn in order to develop their mind to get to enlightenment. Do you guys have any questions on any of these? Okay, so let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 27. Is there someone who would like to read this? You guys online are welcome to volunteer as well. Okay, Kushi. Oh, Max. All right, Max, go ahead. Kushi was just letting me know Max was volunteering. Your mute's on, Max.
There we go. 10 perceptions for curing of an affliction. If, Ananda, you visit the monk Girimananda and speak to him about 10 perceptions, it is possible that on hearing about them, his sickness will immediately subside. What are the 10? 1. The perception of impermanence. 2. The perception of non-self. 3. The perception of unattractiveness of the body. 4. The perception of danger. 5. The perception of abandoning. 6. The perception of freedom from strong feelings. 7. The perception of elimination. 8. The perception of non-delight in the entire world. 9. The perception of impermanence in all conditioned mental objects. And 10. The mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation. And what, Ananda, is a perception of impermanence? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: form is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volitional formations, choices, decisions are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Thus he resides, reflecting on impermanence in these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. This is called the perception of impermanence. And what, Ananda, is the perception of non-self? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: the I is non-self, Forms are non-self. The ear is non-self. Sounds are non-self. The nose is non-self. Odors are non-self. The tongue is non-self. Flavors are non-self. The body is non-self. Physical objects are non-self. The mind is non-self. Mental objects are non-self. Thus, he resides reflecting on non-self in these 6 internal and external sense bases. This is called the perception of non-self. And what, Ananda, is the perception of unattractiveness of the body? Here, a monk reviews this very body upward from the soles of the feet and downward from the tips of the hairs, enclosed in skin, as full of many kinds of impurities. There are in this body hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, pleura, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, stomach, excrement, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, mucus, fluid of the joints, urine. Thus he resides reflecting on unattractiveness in this body. This is called the perception of unattractiveness of the body. And what, Ananda, is the perception of danger? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: this body is the source of much pain and danger, for all sorts of afflictions arise in this body. That is, eye disease, disease of the inner ear, nose disease, tongue disease, body disease, head disease, disease of the external ear, mouth disease, tooth disease, cough, asthma, catarrh, pyrexia, fever, stomachache, fainting, dysentery, gripes, cholera, leprosy, boils, eczema, tuberculosis, epilepsy, ringworm, itch, scab, chickenpox, scabies, hemorrhage, diabetes, hemorrhoids, cancer, fistula, illness originating from bile, phlegm, wind, or their combination. Illness produced by change of climate, illness produced by careless behavior, illness produced by assault, or illness produced as the result of unwholesome karma, and cold, heat, hunger, thirst, defecation, and urination. Thus he resides reflecting on danger in this body. This is called perception of danger. And what, Ananda, is the perception of abandoning? Here a monk does not tolerate an arisen sensual thought. He abandons it, dispels it, terminates it, and obliterates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will, an arisen thought of harming, evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. He abandons them, dispels them, terminates them, and obliterates them. This is called the perception of abandoning. And what, Ananda, is the perception of freedom from strong feelings? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: this is peaceful, this is superb, this is the stilling of mind activities, the letting go of all greed, the destruction of craving, freedom from strong feelings, nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the perception of freedom from strong feelings. And what, Ananda, is the perception of elimination? Here, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, a monk reflects thus: this is peaceful, this is superb, that is, the stilling of the mind activities, the letting go of all greed, the destruction of craving, elimination, nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the perception of elimination. And what, Ananda, is the perception of non-excitement in the entire world? Here, among refrains from any engagement and clinging, mental standpoints, adherences, and underlying tendencies in regard to the world, abandoning them without clinging to them. This is called the perception of non-excitement in the entire world. And what, Ananda, is the perception of impermanence in all conditioned mental objects? Here, a monk is repelled, unenthusiastic, and disinterested by all conditioned mental objects. This is called the perception of impermanence in all conditioned mental objects. And what, Ananda, is mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation? Here, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and established mindfulness in front of him, just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows.
So this just repeats everything, Max, that we have been reading in this book. So probably just pick it up here.
Okay. This is called mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation. If, Ananda, you visit the monk Girimananda and speak to him about these 10 perceptions, it is possible that on hearing about them, he will immediately recover from his sickness. Then, when the Venerable Ananda had learned these 10 perceptions from the perfectly enlightened one, he went to the Venerable Girimananda and spoke to him about them. When the Venerable Girimananda heard about these 10 perceptions, his sickness immediately subsided. The Venerable Girimananda recovered from that sickness, and that is how he was cured of his sickness.
All right. Thank you, Max. So here the Buddha is providing these 10 things that you're going to need to develop as part of your journey to enlightenment. Whether it heals sickness or not, that's something that we can figure out. If you would like to test that, you could. But really what this is designed for is to help you get to enlightenment. So there's 10 individual things here. Rather than go through each individual one of those, what I'll do is just open up to any questions that you guys have. If you heard one in there or two or three that you weren't quite clear on and what they are, since you're going to need to develop these, let me know and we can go in and penetrate into each one of the ones that you need help with. So whether you're online or whether you're here in person, you can just let me know if there's any that you'd like to explore further. Looks like Bruce has a question. Go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you, teacher. I was wondering if you could please give a more broad definition of what the Buddha means by perceptions.
Sure. Perception is like how you view the world around you. It's the way you look out at the world. And a perception could potentially be true, but it could also be false as well. So this is where what you're learning as part of this path is to never cling to any perceptions. A perception in some cases might be thought of as an assumption. You might be assuming something about the world, and you're not interested in clinging to an assumption or a perception. But there's certain wisdom that you need to cultivate, or certain views and opinions about how you view the world, that the Buddha is going to help you to be able to see, that you're able to learn, that you can reflect on, independently verify, and then you can practice. So now if you have, for example, the perception of impermanence, then by you understanding the perception of impermanence, it means that you look out at the world and you understand it to be true that all these material objects around us are indeed impermanent. And now when you see the truth and wisdom in that, you've developed the perception of impermanence. And then each one of these are the same way, is that you're developing this view or opinion of the things around you, but these are all based in wisdom. The 10 that the Buddha is giving you here, they're all based in wisdom, where sometimes you, in the unenlightened state, you might have a certain perception that you haven't based in wisdom, and that the mind is assuming things and is clinging. And that's where you can run into difficulties if you make decisions based on a perception that the mind's clinging to. But what you would like to get to is the truth and wisdom. And now that's what the Buddha is giving you, is 10 individual perceptions to develop that you can then get to wisdom about.
Thank you, teacher. I also have another question, if you don't mind, as well.
Sure, go for it.
Can you please elaborate more on what mental standpoints, adherences, and underlying tendencies are?
Sure. So let me go down to that one.
Number 8.
Thank you. Okay, so the perception of non-excitement in the entire world. First, before we go into more of the question that Bruce is asking, what it means to have the perception of non-excitement in the world is to understand that all these conditioned objects around you aren't going to lead to permanent happiness and permanent joy. That oftentimes we get very excited about a new car or a new job or a new friend or a new piece of clothing or a new pair of shoes or something like that. And the mind bases its inner feelings based on the condition of this thing in the world. And as long as you allow your mind to get excited based on this thing in the world, then that means you're going to experience the other side of that, which is the sadness or the anger or the frustration, because that feeling of excitement that is based on the condition of, I got a new friend or a new job or a new pair of shoes or whatever, those things aren't permanent. All those conditioned objects are impermanent. So that means your feeling of happiness or excitement is impermanent as well. So by the time you develop this perception that you understand that all these things in the world, while we can enjoy them, we can enjoy driving in a nice car, or we can enjoy eating a nice piece of chocolate cake, which is one that I tend to use as an example quite often, or we might enjoy, buying a new pair of shoes and yes, we need this new pair of shoes and this will be great to have a better pair of shoes now. But when we allow our mind to experience the conditioned pleasant feeling based on that, that's where the mind then is going to end up in the sadness or frustration or other discontent feeling, because that object is impermanent. So if you allow your mind to develop a feeling based on a conditioned object that is impermanent, then that means your excitement and happiness is impermanent too. And what you're trying to get to is this permanent joy, this permanent peacefulness. So as long as your mind is basing its inner feelings on some impermanent condition, then you're not going to be able to experience that permanent joy. So understanding non-excitement in the world doesn't mean you look at the world in a pessimistic way and a disgruntled way and just think the world is miserable and horrible. Instead, you just understand that none of these material objects, none of these external things are going to provide lasting inner fulfillment. That in order to get to lasting inner fulfillment, you need to train your mind to not cling or crave or yearn and long for these external things. So here the Buddha is saying a monk refrains from engagement in clinging to mental standpoints, adherences, and underlying tendencies. So mental standpoints would be say that you have a certain opinion or view about something, maybe a political discussion or discourse, or maybe something in the community. If you have this strong mental standpoint and you cling to it, now when you're in conversation with somebody else, you're going to advocate for that strongly. And you might notice that your speech, your intentions, your speech, and your actions become polluted based on this clinging to the mental standpoint. And then the same thing with adherences, like adhering to any one particular thing, like rules. If there's certain rules in your house or certain rules at work and you're clinging to these, right? There's things that we need to do. There's certain opinions and views or certain understanding that we have, like here at the temple. We ask people to wash their cups before they leave, but we're not clinging to it. So if there's an occasional situation where someone doesn't wash their cup, okay, no big deal. Somebody will wash it at some point. We're not all upset or bent out of shape about it, but we just ask for people to generally take care of things when they're at the temple. This makes the temple nice for all of us. But if we had an adherence that we were clinging to, it'd be like a rule that we're clinging to, and now we're all bent out of shape whenever somebody doesn't adhere to that particular thing. And then the underlying tendencies in regard to the world, this is like the way that the world tends to do things. Like in the world, there are certain tendencies that people tend to conform to. Like a big one that I notice, like people coming from the West were usually taught, like in places like America, that when you go to a restaurant, that nobody starts eating until everybody has their food. Right? And all the food comes out. And even if one person gets their food and then 10 minutes later, other people start getting their food, that person might sit there and wait for everybody to get their food before someone will start eating. Well, this is an underlying tendency. This is something that people tend to do, and they think that it's polite to wait for everybody. And I'm not saying it's impolite to wait for everybody, but also that person's food is getting cold and they're not eating, and they could just be eating. So here in Asia, whenever food comes out, we just start eating, right? And we're typically sharing food as a family style anyway, so everybody's kind of starting to eat at the same time regardless. But there's certain underlying tendencies. There's certain things like people think maybe on a Friday night or a Saturday night, let's go out to the bar and let's drink and party it up, right? So if we cling to these underlying tendencies, and then the mind's going to be discontent, and we're going to tend to adhere to those things. But if we develop this perception of non-excitement in the world, then we realize that, okay, well, maybe that person's choosing to go to the bar, or maybe that person is choosing to wait for everyone else to eat, but that doesn't mean I have to do that. I'm not required to do that. So we can let go of these things and just choose to do whatever is wise, and realizing that, okay, well, I'm hungry, my food just showed up, I could sit here and let it get cold and not eat it, or I could just go ahead and start eating it, and then everybody can enjoy our conversation. And it's not rude of me to start eating. It's just food, and everyone's going to be eating at some point anyway. No need to conform to this way of things that maybe people have just come up with over the years. So that would be like an underlying tendency of things that people tend to do in the world, that some people see it as being polite and kind, but not necessarily, and we don't necessarily have to conform to what everybody's doing, but instead we can look at our own personal choices and just make a decision that's wise for us in the present moment.
Thank you, Teacher David. One final question, if I can?
Sure, anytime, as many as you like.
All right. Number 9, I have a problem understanding when he's talking about all conditioned mental objects. Are those the same as the 10 fetters, the mental objects?
Yes, mental objects are, or I should say the 10 fetters are mental objects. So those are all mental objects. They're all conditioned. They're all impermanent. And then also, you can also think of a mental object as like, just say you had a thought. That could be considered a mental object. We talk about mental objects in 2 different ways. Primarily, we talk about mental objects as part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, in that deeply rooted container that you've heard me talk about, which are the 10 fetters, like central desire, ill will, things like this. These are mental objects. But more loosely, you can think about a mental object as just a thought or something you're thinking about. This could be considered a mental object in a lighter degree, but those 10 fetters are really what we refer to as mental objects. But anything going on in the mind is a conditioned object, is what the Buddha's really referring to here, in that it's all impermanent. Anything that's going through the mind is impermanent. It's not until you get to that enlightened mental state of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy that now that's an unconditioned quality of mind that is permanent. But all those other things that you experience, like thoughts and feelings and sensual desire, ill will, all those fetters, those are all impermanent.
Thank you very much, Teacher David.
You're welcome, sir. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 28. Is there someone who would like to read this? Sure, go ahead, Kushi.
Five things to penetrate to the unshakable. First discourse. Monks, possessing 5 things among pursuing mindfulness of breathing, breathing mindfulness meditation, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable. What 5? First, here a monk has few undertakings, few tasks, is easy to support, and is easily contented contented with the necessities of life. Second, he eats little and is intent on moderation regarding food. Third, he is rarely drowsy and is intent on alertness. Fourth, he has learned much, remembers what he has learned, and cultivates what he has learned. Those teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, which proclaims the perfectly complete and pure spiritual life. Such teachings as this he has learned much of, retained in mind, recited verbally, mentally investigated, and penetrated well by view. Fifth, he reviews the extent to which his mind is liberated. Possessing these 5 things, a monk pursuing mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable. Second discourse. Monks possessing 5 things, a monk developing mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, in no long time penetrates to the unshakable.
The only one that's different here, Kushi, is number 4.
Okay.
So you can just read that one.
Okay. Fourth, he gets to hear at will, without trouble or difficulty, talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening up the heart. That is, talk on elimination of desires, on the contentment, on solitude, on not getting bound up with others, on arousing energy, on virtuous behavior, on concentration, on wisdom, on liberation, on the wisdom and vision of liberation.
And then, let's see, same thing here. It's just number 4 that is different.
Okay. Third discourse. He is a forest dweller who resorts to remote lodgings.
Okay, thank you. So here the Buddha is describing these 5 things to penetrate to the unshakable. The unshakable is liberation of mind, enlightenment, because when the mind is enlightened, it's unshakable. You're not going to have shyness, you're not going to have jealousy or guilt or shame or fear. The mind is steady and calm and stable. It's unshakable. There's nothing that can happen in the world that would shake you up. Even as an enlightened being, if you had a child and your child was murdered for any reason, your mind wouldn't be shaken up by that. It's not that you don't care, it's not that you don't love, it's that your mind isn't going to be shaken up by some external thing. You can still love and you can still care, even if you have an experience where someone close to you dies for any reason whatsoever. It's not love that shakes up the mind. It's the craving, desire, attachment, the craving permanence that shakes up the mind. So by the time the mind gets to enlightenment and gets to this unshakable mind, the steady mind, there's nothing that could shake it up because there's no longer any cravings, desires, attachments that exist in the mind. So the Buddha's providing 3 discourses here that's providing 5 things. Well, number 4 keeps changing, so there's actually more than 5, right? There's, what would that be, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 things that the Buddha is really truly sharing, and this is common in his discourses, that when you see him talk about 5 things to penetrate to the unshakable, it's not only these 5. Or sometimes he says, these are the 5 benefits of meditation. That's not the only 5. He'll teach another discourse where he says, here's another 5 things, and here's another 5 things. But he gives these lists because this is an easy way for people to remember his teachings. Because remember, he's teaching in an oral tradition. So in an oral tradition, you tell stories. That's one way to get people to remember your teachings. The other way is you repeat your teachings. If you read the pure Pali Canon, there's repetition where you can read 100 pages and only one sentence is changing, or sometimes even only one word is changing over 100 different pages. In some cases here, you can see that just that one aspect is changing. And the other way that you get people to remember your teachings is not just telling stories and repetition, but giving lists. If you give a list, then if people remember 3 or 4 of your 5, eventually they're going to remember the 5th one because they know, oh, there's a 5th one, there's a 5th one. What's that 5th one? So this is the way that the Buddha taught in order to help people remember this oral tradition. So he talks about here, a monk has few undertakings, few tasks, is easy to support, and is easily contented with the necessities of life. If your mind is unenlightened and you have a lot of craving, you might just be go, 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 go. Let me see how many things I can get done in a day. You might wake up with like a list of 20, 30, 50 things that you're trying to accomplish. Go, 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 go. Because every time you get one of those things accomplished, you get one of those conditioned pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. So the unenlightened mind will oftentimes have this huge to-do list and go, 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 go throughout our life, right? Well, what you're trying to do is restrain the mind to not do that. So if you just kind of have like a general list of things that you're trying to get done in a particular day, and then you just gradually go about it, if you're not clinging to any of those things, if something happens along the way, then you can adjust your schedule. So when I wake up in the morning, I might have 3 or 4 things, perhaps, maybe less, that I'm looking to do. But let's just say I come here to the temple with a goal to do something, and I start doing that thing. But then say a student shows up and says, hey, David, I'd like to talk to you. Okay, let's talk. I'll just put all that stuff on hold, right? Let's talk. What's your questions, right? So if you have a big, huge list of things to do, if any one particular thing gets in the way, you'll kind of step over that thing in order just to get your list of tasks completed. But what you would like to do is just have a few things, just have a couple of things that you're looking to do in a given day and gradually work towards that. And then if you get all those done and you have extra time, then maybe you relax, maybe you rest, or maybe you add another thing to your list. So that's what the Buddha is sharing here, is that if you have craving, you're going to just push and push and push and push and push, but you're trying to restrain the mind and pull it back. So having few tasks is actually quite helpful on your journey to enlightenment. And then just look for the basic necessities of life. The basic necessities of life are things like food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Those are the only 5 things that we truly need in order to exist. Those are the only necessities: food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But when the mind is craving, it oftentimes wants to go beyond that. It wants a lot more than that. And it can only be satisfied if it gets that piece of chocolate cake, or if it gets to go to the movies today, or if your friend calls you today, or this, that, or the other thing. So if you just look at your basic necessities and be like, you know what? I've got my basic necessities. Anything else is just a bonus. If I get to go to the movies today, wonderful, I'll go to the movies. But if I don't, that's fine too. I've got my food, I've got my water, my clothing, my shelter, my medical care. I've got all that taken care of. Anything else beyond that is just a bonus. But oftentimes, as I mentioned, when the mind has craving and wants, it wants things way beyond that. Number 2 is that he eats little in his intent on moderation regarding food. The Buddha only ate 1 time a day. Nowadays, we know that we need to eat potentially more in some situations, depending on our lifestyle. As a household practitioner, we might need to eat 2, 3 times, maybe more, because our calorie intake needs to be higher, because our needs for the body is higher. You know, if you're doing what the Buddha did, which was basically walk around and teach people and meditate, your caloric needs are a lot lower. And also, some people say that food during that time frame, 2,500 years ago, probably had a higher caloric value. So a broccoli with the clean water and clean soil that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha might have had a higher caloric value than the broccoli that we eat today. So he might have been able to eat just 1 meal a day. There are people today who do eat 1 meal a day, but this isn't actually required in order to get to enlightenment. But eating in moderation is. If you eat in moderation, then you're not gorging at a meal. You're not filling up your stomach and gorging and putting all this work on the body, but instead you're just gradually eating throughout your day, maybe smaller portions. In some cultures, there's these big, huge portions, and you would like to restrain the mind and not eat these big, huge portions and put this strain on the body, because now the body's going to have to work harder, thus you're going to have a shorter life. But also, one of the other things around food that you need to be aware of is oftentimes the mind eats based on emotion. So if you're sad or you're frustrated or angry, you might turn to like chocolate or ice cream or something like this in order to get those pleasant feelings back. Because the mind in the unenlightened state, the only way it knows how to get pleasant feelings is that it does it through craving, desire, attachment. So we will tend to, in the unenlightened state, not see the full problem. And when we're feeling painful feelings, we'll turn to something like food out of emotion, and then we might overeat, or we might just eat based on emotion. But what the Buddha teaches, and the reason why he taught once a day to eat, is to ensure that you're not eating based on emotion. Because if you're only eating once a day to sustain the body, in the evening time, if you get a phone call and you start experiencing sadness, you won't turn to food to eat. But you can still accomplish getting to enlightenment by eating 2, 3, 4, 5 meals a day, depending on what you eat. But you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment if you were still eating out of emotion. So you're going to need to train your mind to be able to observe that, I'm turning to that ice cream or that chocolate cake based on that phone call I got from my mom where she gave me that bad news, and now I feel sad and frustrated, and I'm only turning to that chocolate cake because of that. And you need to be able to restrain the mind. It doesn't mean you can't ever eat chocolate cake. It just means that you'd like to eat in moderation and that you're not eating based on emotion. Then he talks here that he's rarely drowsy and is intent on alertness. So as you awaken your mind and you're getting rid of this pollution, you'll notice that you're not drowsy, where oftentimes when the mind is inattentive and unalert, when it's polluted with craving, the mind is chasing throughout your day. So therefore, you can become drowsy really easily because the mind's constantly chasing one thing after another, after another, after another. So if you train your mind to not be chasing, you can sustain your energy and not have this drowsiness. As an enlightened being, you'll still experience sleepiness. You'll still need to sleep. There's still that needs to occur. But you won't experience the exhaustion or the tiredness or the drowsiness. If the mind is sleepy, then you'll just get some sleep and then you'll wake up feeling refreshed. But in the unenlightened state, when there's pollution, there could be bouts of drowsiness, or when you awake from sleeping, you could awake very slowly. For some people, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even an hour after waking up. You can still be drowsy if the mind is polluted and unenlightened. But by the time you clear out this pollution, you'll notice this crispness and this clarity in the mind that even when you wake up, you can wake up and then 5 minutes later, 3 minutes later, you can be doing something where your mind needs attentiveness and alertness. Then he talks here about he learned much, remembers what he has learned, cultivates what he has learned. This is essentially learning the teachings, that profound memory that I talk about with the enlightened mind, that as you clear out the pollution of mind, you'll experience this, not only this focus, concentration, clarity of mind, but this deep memory. And you're going to need that in order to get to enlightenment. So as you're bringing down your pollution of mind, your memory starts increasing more and more because you're going to need to remember the teachings, not word for word like they did during the lifetime of the Buddha, but you're going to need to remember things like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. You're going to need to know what those are. That's the Eightfold Path, the core central teaching of the Buddha. You're going to need to know what those steps are and how to practice each individual one of them. And when you're first getting started, it's quite a challenge because the mind is fairly polluted. But as you're training your mind with meditation and other things, your memory starts to develop more and more, and you can remember these types of teachings and others, and then you can apply them in daily life pretty readily. Let me go to these other two and then I'll open up for questions. So here he says, he hears at will without trouble or difficulty talk concerned with the holy life that is conducive to opening the heart. We talked about this one in a previous chapter, so I don't know that I need to go over that, but if you guys have questions on it, just let me know. And then this next one here in the third discourse is the person is a forest dweller who resorts to remote lodgings. During the lifetime of the Buddha, his students who were further along would go out into the forest and they would spend time alone for extended periods of time. This is the way to train the mind to be comfortable being alone. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we aren't comfortable being alone. If we go to the mall, we want somebody to come with us. If we go to the movies, we want somebody to come with us. If we're going to a restaurant, we want somebody to be with us. But what you need to do is train your mind to be able to be comfortable and content when you're alone. So if right now you're regularly going places with people and you always have people around you by and large, you need to get to the point where you're comfortable doing things alone. Here in Thailand, this is a great thing. A lot of times people travel alone, or they come to the temple alone, or they go to the movies alone. You can see when you go out to the mall, there's a lot of people that are alone here in Thailand. They're spending time alone and training their mind to be comfortable with doing that. Because if you don't enjoy spending time alone by yourself, with yourself, who would ever enjoy spending time with you, right? You've got to get to the point where you enjoy spending time with yourself and you're peaceful and joyful spending time with yourself. And then other people will enjoy spending time with you. But if you don't enjoy spending time alone with yourself, who would ever enjoy spending time with you? So train your mind to be comfortable and content and joyful when you're alone. And that might mean you need to do things alone. Take yourself out on a date, right? Go to the movies, take yourself to dinner. This is really fun. Fall in love with yourself. And then you'll find that other people will really enjoy spending time with you as well. So these are things that the Buddha is sharing as a way to help you get to liberation, to get to enlightenment. Of course, there's more than just these, but this is 5 things to penetrate to the unshakable, that unshakable, steady, calm mind of the enlightened mental state. Any questions?
Just by curiosity, you said the Buddha used to eat only once a day? And yeah, so do you know if it was during the morning, during the evening, or?
So the Buddha would eat prior to noon. So noon is midday, what we would consider noon. So during his lifetime, they didn't have watches or timepieces. So they kept track of the time based on the sun or the moon and things like this. And they would call it morning, midday, and evening. So during his lifetime, he would eat prior to midday, which we know to be noon. So the monks, even today, they will typically eat prior to noon. And nowadays, some of the monks, a large majority of them, eat twice a day, where there are some who still eat once a day. But again, this isn't required in order to get to enlightenment. It is a practice that can be employed in order to help you get rid of sensual desire, particularly for food. But there's other things you can do too. Like if you go out to restaurants regularly and you eat at restaurants, rather than you selecting your own food, you can ask the food server to select it for you. They come to your table, they say, hey, what would you like to eat? What would you eat if you were eating here? They're like, oh, I would eat that. Okay, great. I'll take that. Right? You just accept whatever they give you. This is essentially emulating what the monks do. The monks, when they walk down the street, they just hold their bowl out. Whatever food they get, that's what they eat. So you can emulate that from the household life by just choosing to eat whatever people suggest or whatever people offer, even though you wouldn't normally eat that, and maybe your mind doesn't even like that food. You're going to need to train your mind to look at food as just to sustain the body, and that you can eat any and all foods. If there's any foods that you despise right now or you're repulsed by, you're going to ultimately need to train the mind to get rid of that craving, desire, attachment, to no longer long and yearn through the tongue for a particular type of food, and now train your mind that you can eat any and all foods. And this is one of the ways to do that. And then you can also train your mind to not eat based on emotion. So you could eat once a day or twice a day before noon. That's one way to do it. But you could also do other things too, because some of us, we might work certain hours where we need food at a certain time, particularly in the household life, because our caloric needs are a lot higher than an ordained practitioner. So you can eat 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day if that's what you need to eat, but just be attentive to the mind and why is it choosing to eat? Does it truly need to eat because the body needs food? Or is it because the mind is longing and yearning for pleasant feelings? The Buddha even talks about this in other discourses where he says that you should only eat enough food that it eliminates the pain that the body is experiencing due to the hunger pain. That once you eat beyond that, you're now gorging and the mind could be craving. So you can be attentive to the mind and choose to eat based on what the body needs rather than what the mind wants, because the mind's going to be longing and yearning through the tongue. So food is to nourish the body, not to please the tongue. Whoa. Okay. Sorry about that. We sometimes get people that come into our Zoom session and try to crash our Zoom session. So this is what somebody was trying to do. Okay. So let me turn off this. Let me turn this on. So there's a button I can press to stop that from happening. All right. So I was pretty much at the end of that description anyway on food. Any questions on that? All right, so let's go on to the next chapter, which is chapter 29, the 5 hindrances that weaken wisdom. On the previous one, sure.
Yeah, so as we were talking about like a to-do list and as we go in our day, so I'm always curious like what causes the burnouts because I think there is some craving there which causes the burnout. So can you break that down and how can we not burn out?
Yeah, this is perfect. So like in daily life, individual could have craving and be pursuing things out of craving. This is what the unenlightened mind does, the longing, the yearning, the chasing. And we just chase and chase and chase and chase. And we call those the 3 poisons, the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires, right? So now when a craving burns out, when it gets extinguished, a person can feel exhausted, right? And if you've been chasing after a certain goal for many months or many years, you can get to the point where you've burned out. What you've burned out is you've burned out your craving, that you were originally chasing that certain goal or objective or interest. Rather than pursuing it as a goal, objective, or interest, it was being pursued by craving, longing, and yearning. And then eventually the mind gets to a point where it burns out. It's exhausted because it just kept chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing. It's like a dog chasing a rabbit. Eventually it'll get burned out and it'll just get tired of chasing the rabbit. Or, a fox chasing a squirrel, same kind of thing. It just gets burned out. The craving has been extinguished. Well, the way that you ensure that you have longevity in your career or in life is don't pursue things based in craving. As soon as you start basing things in craving, that craving is going to burn out at some point. This is why the Buddha teaches not to pursue gain with gain, like having a job just based on profits. If you just chase profits all the time, eventually that craving is going to get exhausted and extinguished, and you're going to be left with a job that you really don't have motivation and enthusiasm about, but you were just pursuing it based out of profits perhaps. So somebody can get burned out in a job, for example, if all they're doing is chasing profits. But if you do things based on goals, objectives, or interests, things that you're trying to achieve, and you're not doing it based in craving, then you won't get burned out. This is why you can sustain your energy as an enlightened being, where you just consistently work towards things more and more readily, because you're not basing it in craving. You're not pursuing goals, objectives, or interests with craving. You're doing it with non-craving, where you're just gradually working towards this goal. And then you can sustain your energy because your mind is uplifted and you won't burn out. Okay, anybody would like to read this one? It is 12 o'clock, I'm noticing here. This is the time we usually end here at the temples at 12. I'm fine to continue to study with you guys if you would like, but I would just like to be sensitive to y'all's time. You guys are always welcome to come and go as you please throughout any of our classes, but I just thought I would let you guys know that it's 12 o'clock. Yeah, you guys are fine? You like to keep learning? Okay, let's keep going. Would somebody like to read this? Gary, would you like to read it? It looks like you're about to read it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Ladies? Okay.
The 5 hindrances that weaken wisdom. Monks, there are these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom. What 5? First, sensual desire is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. Ill will is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. Complacency is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. Restlessness and worry is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens wisdom. Doubt is an obstruction, a hindrance, a burden of the mind, a state that weakens the wisdom. These are the 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom. Monks, without having abandoned these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken the wisdom, it is impossible that a monk with his ineffective and fragile wisdom might know his own wholesomeness, the wholesomeness of others, or the wholesomeness of both, or realize the superhuman distinction in wisdom and vision worthy of the noble ones. Suppose a river were flowing down from a mountain, traveling a long distance with a swift current, carrying along much trash. Then, on both of its banks, a man would open irrigation channels. In such a case, the current in the middle of the river would be dispersed, spread out, and divided, so that the river would no longer travel a long distance with a swift current carrying along much trash. So too, without having abandoned these 5 obstructions, hindrances, burdens of the mind, states that weaken wisdom, it is impossible that a monk with his ineffective and fragile wisdom might know his own wholesomeness, the wholesomeness of others, or the wholesomeness of both, or might realize a superhuman distinction in wisdom and vision worthy of the noble ones. The followings are the reverse aspects of monks who are void of hindrances. These are the monks who penetrate ignorance, unknowing of true reality through wisdom, just as swift current of a river with irrigation channels closed on both of its banks couldn't travel a long distance.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So here, this is the Buddha just kind of introducing the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 hindrances to enlightenment, the obstructions, the obstacles that are going to hinder an individual from getting to enlightenment. And I teach a class where I go through each of these 5 in detail. In fact, I just taught one recently where I went through each one of these. 4 out of the 5 are actually part of the fetters, the 10 fetters. And then there's one that isn't part of the 10 fetters, which is the complacency. So tomorrow I'm going to be teaching the 10 fetters, which will go through these 4 plus others as well. But let's just take a couple of them and kind of look at them, like sensual desire. This is one that we've kind of been talking about already. This is where the mind is longing and yearning through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. These are the 6 sense bases where the mind, having sensual desire, it wants permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. And you can see this, that if you see something that is agreeable to you, you might get conditioned pleasant feelings if you have a craving in the mind. But then if you see something that's disagreeable to you, based on that craving in the mind, you now get the painful feelings. That's because of sensual desire. And the same thing is happening with the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, in the mind itself. So this needs to be purified from the mind, and a vast majority of what the Buddha is teaching you is how to eliminate the sensual desire. That's what we were just talking about with food, is training the mind to not long and yearn through the tongue, because the mind has sensual desire, and now the tongue, in this example, is the doorway that you're letting in this contact. So the Buddha isn't explaining to you rules or commandments. He's explaining to you how your mind works. He's basically taking human psychology and bringing it down to a common language that everybody can understand. And when you understand this, then you can actually train your mind to overcome those discontent feelings. There's things like ill will. This is like anger, hatred, and ill will, the bitterness and hostility. By the time an individual gets to enlightenment, that will have been eliminated. Complacency, this is often translated in original text as sloth and torpor, but I translate it as complacency, that if the mind is dull, lethargic, lackluster, that there isn't motivation or ambition or vigor, then this is going to hinder you to get to your enlightenment because you need a certain amount of energy. You need to be able to be willing to come to classes, to read books, to participate in class, to do meditation, to ask your teacher questions. You need to observe and notice that, hey, there's an unwholesome thought in the mind. Let me take action to eliminate that from the mind. There needs to be a certain amount of energy or motivation or enthusiasm in the mind to be able to make its way to enlightenment. If the mind was complacent, dull, and lethargic, you wouldn't be able to make your way to enlightenment. So where you see your mind's dull and lethargic, the Buddha provides tools and techniques about how to overcome that. But here he's just explaining to you that it is an hindrance. And then in other parts of his teachings, he provides you the solutions to these hindrances of how to overcome them so that they no longer block you or obstruct you from getting to enlightenment. Restlessness and worry, this is like the mind being anxious or overactive or worried about things in the world. If you watch the news and you get frustrated or agitated, this is because you have restlessness and worry in the mind. The mind's worried about things that are going on in the world, not understanding how the world functions. And then what doubt is, this is doubt about the teachings and their ability of them to be able to attain enlightenment. Pretty much everybody who comes to the path is going to have doubt. You're going to have doubt when you come to the path to enlightenment. Did this person, the Buddha, actually live? Do his teachings actually lead to this enlightened mental state that David's talking about? Is it even possible for me to get to enlightenment? Do I have the ability to do that? Can this teacher who I'm learning with actually guide me to enlightenment? There's all kinds of doubts that can go through the mind as you're getting on the path to enlightenment. But if you investigate the teachings deeply enough, you can get to a point where you've learned them enough, you've reflected on them, and you've practiced them, and you've seen significant improvement to the condition of the mind, that you'll have no doubt that these teachings are indeed leading to an improved condition of mind and an improved condition of your life. You will have eliminated this hindrance, which is also one of the fetters. And when you get to that point, then you will know you have found the true teachings that lead to enlightenment, because you've seen the condition of your mind gradually improve. So you don't get to the elimination of doubt through blind belief or faith. You get to the elimination of doubt through investigating the teachings. So you can harness this doubt. If you have doubt now, you can harness it to make the mind inquisitive and really want the mind, or I should say, you really aspire for the mind to be able to learn and develop, and you harness that doubt into making an inquisitive mind. Questions on this chapter? No? Okay. I don't see any questions online either. Max is still hanging out with us. He's in a different time zone that probably allows him to stay awake. So, all right. So this is number 30, chapter 30. Someone would like to read this? Go ahead.
These 5 hindrances are called obstacles, hindrances, covering up, envelopings. Vaseta, it is just as if this river Asiravati were full of water so that a crow could drink out of it, and a man should come along wishing to cross over, to get to the other side, to get across, and were to lie down on this bank, covering his head with a shawl. What do you think, Vaseta? Would that man be able to get to the other side? No, Master Teacher Gotama. In the same way, Vaseta, in the noble discipline, these 5 hindrances are called obstacles, hindrances, covering up, envelopings. Which 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, of ill will, of complacency, of restlessness, and worry or doubt. These 5 are called obstacles, hindrances, covering up, envelopings. And these Brahmins learned in the 3 Vedas are caught up, confined in, obstructed, entangled in these 5 hindrances. But that such Brahmins learned in the 3 Vedas, who persistently neglect what a Brahmin should do, and persistently do what a Brahmin should not do, and who are caught up, confined in, obstructed, entangled in these 5 hindrances, should attain after death, at the breaking up of the body, to union with Brahma, God. That is just not possible.
Okay, thank you. So here, these 5 hindrances are called obstacles, hindrances, covering ups, envelopings, because as long as these 5 hindrances are in the mind, they're going to obstruct an individual from getting to enlightenment. And the Buddha is using a story here because, once again, it helps people to remember your teachings if you can use stories. So he's talking to this person and he says, it is just if this river, the name of the river, which Kushi may know how to pronounce. Okay, there we go. If it were full of water so that a crow could drink out of it, and a man should come along wishing to cross over, to get to the other side, to get across, and were to lie down on its bank, covering his head with a shawl, what do you think? Would that man be able to get to the other side? Well, of course not, right? Because he doesn't have a raft. He doesn't have a way to get to the other side. He's just laying on one side, covering up his face or covering up his eyes. He's not even able to see. And the Buddha says, in this same way, in the noble discipline, these 5 hindrances are called obstructions, hindrances, covering ups, enveloping. So you wouldn't be able to get to the other side of the river if you just lay down on one bank and covered up your eyes. That's not going to help you to get to the other side of the bank. So same thing is these 5 obstructions are hindering the mind from being able to get to this enlightened mental state. Exactly. Right? So now when you understand what those problems are, which are sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry and doubt, now if you understand what those are and what the antidotes are, because when I teach these 5 hindrances, I explain to you what they are, I explain to you what the symptoms of them are, and then I explain to you how to eliminate them from the mind and how to know that you actually have eliminated them. So here we're just reviewing the words of the Buddha, but if you study with the books or you study in the other courses and programs, I teach you exactly what these are, what the symptoms of them are, how to eliminate them, and how to know when you actually have eliminated them. And then he starts talking about Brahmin. What a Brahmin is a Hindu priest. During the lifetime of the Buddha, and even now, there's Hindu priests, and Hindu priests during that lifetime were very prominent in Indian culture, which we would call Indian culture, but back then it wasn't yet India. And these Brahmin priests were essentially doing various rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in order to help these people to get to a better way of life. At least the belief was that if you paid these Brahmin priests a certain amount of money, that then they would pray on your behalf or they would do some kind of rites or ritual and your life was supposed to get better. And the Buddha taught that, no, this isn't how your life gets better. Your life gets better by learning and cultivating wisdom, by training your mind, by understanding the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And when you make wise decisions, that's what leads to wholesome results, not rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So in the fundamental teachings of the Buddha in his teachings, there are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Even though if you go into various venues that are considering what they're doing Buddhist, you might see rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. The Buddha never taught those things. So here, referring to the Brahmin, what a Brahmin was doing, and I'm not sure nowadays, but the goal was to have this union with God, that after you die, you're going to have this union with God. Not so different than maybe a Christian practitioner might think that after death, their goal is to have this union with God. And what the Buddha was saying is that as long as somebody has these 5 hindrances, that they're not going to have this union with God that they aspire for. That if they have central desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry and doubt, that there's not going to be this union with God. That wasn't the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha, is to have this union with God. It's to get to enlightenment. But some of the students that were learning with him were coming from this background of studying with Brahmin. In fact, Brahmin would sometimes study with the Buddha, because not only were they doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, but Brahmin were teaching a certain, aspect of moral conduct and things like this. So they would oftentimes learn with the Buddha and then maybe incorporate some of his teachings into what they were teaching. So the Buddha was talking to an audience that were well versed in studying with Brahmin and having this aspiration for this union with God. And he was sharing that you're not going to be able to experience this union with God as long as you have these obstructions. Just like you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment with these 5 hindrances, you're not going to be able to have a union with God if you have these 5 obstructions either. Because these 5 obstructions, they motivate unskillful conduct. So whether it's sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness, and worry or doubt, they're going to motivate unskillful conduct. And by eliminating those from the mind will be more purified, and you can see the truth for yourself that your mind is more peaceful and more joyful without these hindrances and all the other 10 fetters as well. One of the biggest hindrance that's in the unenlightened mind is referred to as ignorance. The Buddha doesn't call it out as a specific hindrance here because it's understood through all of his other teachings that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality is a huge hindrance to enlightenment. As long as the mind lacks wisdom of how to progress to this enlightened mental state, it will hinder it from getting to enlightenment. It's an obstruction. So the biggest obstruction of all obstructions is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. That's like the umbrella. because you wouldn't even know about sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness, and worry and doubt if it wasn't for ignorance. If there's ignorance in the mind, you wouldn't be studying the teachings of the Buddha, and you wouldn't even learn about these things. So what you're doing is you're learning about true reality and what is actually happening based on these natural laws, and now you're cultivating wisdom so that you know true reality. So ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, is the biggest hindrance of all hindrances, and that's why we start with something like the Four Noble Truths as someone who's just getting started on the path, so that you can learn that those discontent feelings are being caused by your own mind, because part of the mind's ignorance or unknowing of true reality is that other people are causing us to be angry or frustrated or irritated. And you can see the truth through the Four Noble Truths that that's just not true. But as long as the mind is holding on to that ignorance or unknowing of true reality, it's going to be obstructed from eliminating discontent feelings. Because as long as the mind thinks that other people are causing you to be discontent, then you'll keep trying to change other people. You'll keep trying to push people away, being bitter and harsh, putting expectations on people. Because of this ignorance, you'll never solve your discontent feelings, because the mind is going around the world trying to fix everybody else. And now that ignorance is an obstruction, it's a hindrance. So the way that you transform that ignorance is you get to wisdom. And that's why you never believe the teachings of the Buddha, but you learn, reflect, and practice so that you can get to wisdom, independently verifying his teachings. Any questions on this chapter? Yes, ma'am.
It's like two questions. Some people, the only thing they want in life is to meet someone, to create a family. And I'm wondering if it's seen as a desire or an obstacle. And I'm wondering also, what's the point of being with someone, of getting married and having children? Is it like normal to want this, and is it normal not to want this?
Yeah, so there definitely are certain people in the world who have a craving, a desire, attachment for a partner or a family or these kinds of things. And there's two ways to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment. Any and all craving, desire, attachment is going to lead to discontentedness at some point. If you have a craving in your mind for a partner and you don't have a partner, you'll feel lonely. You'll feel maybe miserable that you don't have a partner, because your mind is longing, yearning for one. So you have a choice there. Is you can either train your mind to cut that off and let it go, and realize that not everyone in the world has a partner, and that it's okay to live a single life, and that it's possible for you to live a single life and be quite peaceful and quite joyful. You could do that, and there's training to help you be able to do that. But there's another way to eliminate craving too, and that is to fulfill it. If someone has a longing and yearning for a partner, and they've always wanted to have a partner, you can actually find a partner, get a partner, develop a relationship, and this will extinguish your craving for having one, because you actually have one. But now you're probably going to be attached to your partner, and now you need to train your mind of how to love without attachment. So in relationships, it's possible to exist in a relationship without craving, desire, attachment. But the unenlightened mind doesn't understand how to do that, because it hasn't been trained. So there's training the mind to completely eliminate an attachment, a craving, desire, attachment, or there's actually fulfilling it. If you've always wanted to have kids and you don't have kids, one of the ways to eliminate that craving is to have children. So there's going to be some cravings on this journey to enlightenment that an individual will need to cut off and eliminate. And there's other cravings that you'll need to fulfill, and you'll just need to fulfill it. And that's how you're going to extinguish your craving. So if somebody chooses to have a relationship and have a family, that's a choice for them to make. There's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that is like a rule or a commandment that is going to force upon you what you should or shouldn't do in life. Everything's your own personal choice. So if somebody says, I'd like to have a partner, and that's what they like to do, wonderful, have a partner. The teachings of the Buddha are going to help you to actually discern and figure out a wise choice about what type of partner to have. And when you're in that relationship with your partner, the teachings of the Buddha are going to help you to be able to have a very healthy and wholesome relationship with that person. Same thing if somebody chose to have kids. The teachings of the Buddha would really help them to guide their children in life. And over time, as you gain that wisdom, you'd be able to then help your children to be guided in the world. So having a family, it can be a craving, but it doesn't mean that one doesn't need to do it or shouldn't do it. It's up to each individual to decide for themselves if they're going to have a family or not. And not everybody's going to have a partner. Not everyone's going to have a family. Not everybody enjoys having sexual contact with the opposite gender. So they might not have a family because of that. And that's the uniqueness of the world and the impermanence of the world. And that's one of the things that makes it so wonderful, is that we're all different and we're all unique. And it's just a matter of understanding your mind, and is this a craving to be with a partner and to have a family? Most likely it probably is. And then the person's going to decide, what should I do? Should I cut it off and eliminate it and decide to live a single life? Or should I fulfill it and go ahead and get a partner and have a family? And each individual needs to make that choice for themselves. And that's the beauty of this path to enlightenment, is it's all about your own personal choices and your own journey, rather than somebody telling you what you should or shouldn't do in life. Mm-hmm. Can you get a mic? I know you have a loud voice, but the people online won't be able to hear you.
Okay. Is it on?
Yep, sure is.
Okay. In terms of the way it appears to me that Buddhism is structured in Thailand, you can't be a monk and have a family. Isn't that true?
So if you're going to ordain, the ordained path is like this womb of a woman, where the womb of a woman is the perfect, most ideal place for a fetus to grow and develop. And the conditions in the womb are such that this fetus can grow and develop into an actual being and live and have a wonderful life. So the same thing is true about the ordained life, that household practitioners are creating an environment in which it's ideal for somebody to be able to get to enlightenment. It's not guaranteed, but it's an ideal environment where they strip away a lot of the cravings, desires, attachments. That's why you have 2 robes, a bowl, and that's it. You don't have relationships outside with life partners. You don't have a house, a car. You don't have a job, all these kinds of things. So it strips away, and you're choosing to step into that life of homelessness, and it strips away all those different things. And an individual knows that that's what they're doing. So they have the ability to live in this womb and develop and get closer and closer to enlightenment as their own personal choice. But you can still get to enlightenment while having a life partner, and by even having a family. You can still get to enlightenment. The Buddha had a wife and a son before he became enlightened. So it's possible, but you need to eliminate the attachment in the mind. You need to learn how to love without attachment, which is another degree of wisdom that somebody needs to develop. And if somebody is looking to kind of like get to enlightenment in kind of like the shortest time frame and the most conducive environment, ordaining would provide you the opportunity to do that. There's certain benefits, but there's also certain challenges to ordaining as well that makes it challenging to get to enlightenment. But yes, ordaining, you wouldn't have a life partner, you wouldn't have a family. If you already have a family, by the time you ordain, you're leaving that all behind. And your family needs to agree that you're able to go off and ordain. And that was something that the Buddha ensured existed during his lifetime, and it remains today, that if you decide to go ordain, your family needs to support you to be able to do that, because their minds need to let go. So that's why it's set up that way. And to answer your question, yes, that is true. But you can still get to enlightenment, even with a partner and with a family. It's possible, but an individual just needs to learn how to love without attachment, which sounds simple, but it requires a lot of work. No, I mean, it's easy to say, right? It's easy to say, learn how to love without attachment. Okay, how do we do that, teacher? Well, there's classes and courses and chapters and books that I teach people how to love without attachment, because the mind in the unenlightened state doesn't know how to do that. We typically view craving, desire, attachment as love. Any other questions on this chapter? Okay, so we usually study 10 chapters per week, which this is the 10 chapters. This particular book goes another 4 chapters and then it's done. If you guys would like to study those additional 4 chapters, we can, or we can stop here. It's totally up to you guys. There's 4 more chapters. Let's see what they are. Let's see. This is 31. So this is where the Buddha's teaching some other things related to craving, anger. This is the 5 hindrances in here he's talking about again. So we've already studied those 5 hindrances. He also is talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness here, which I've taught. And then he talks about the jhanas a bit. Let's see here. He's talking about the cause and reason for the true teachings to endure long after a Tathagata has attained final nibbana. So here, a Buddha, they're coming into the world and providing the teachings of what it takes in order for people to get to enlightenment. They're declaring the path to enlightenment. They're putting down lights along the path to enlightenment, making it very clear to everybody of what it takes to get to enlightenment. And then once they die, which we call final nibbana or final enlightenment, the Buddha's providing guidance of what does it take to ensure that those teachings sustain in the world for the longest period of time? Because once a Buddha dies, the teachings will be shining really brightly in the world, and you would like to sustain them in the world for as long as possible so that as many people as possible can get to enlightenment, even after the death of a Buddha. So here he basically shares that it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness that ensure that the teachings sustain for a really long period of time. There's other teachings that he shares, other reasons how to ensure the teachings sustain in the world long after his death. But here he's talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because developing this is what ultimately is going to lead to enlightenment itself, is the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which I teach in other classes and stuff like that. And then let's see what else we got here. You can see all the different words that I share to help you guys understand more and more about what the Buddha is teaching. Great good of mindfulness directed to the body. Here, this is actually a summary of all the various chapters we've already read, where he goes through all the various reasons why breathing mindfulness meditation is beneficial and helpful, and it actually leads to this great good. So there's this strong sense of motivation. Great good leads to great security from bondage, leads to mindfulness and clear comprehension, leads to attainment of wisdom and vision, leads to peaceful dwellings in this very life, leads to realization of the fruit of wisdom and liberation. So he's talking about all these different benefits of breathing mindfulness meditation. And then he's going through some details on that. And then let's see the very last one. And then he goes through all these. There's quite a bit here that someone could read and spend time with. This is a simple one. Do concentration in morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. This is where the Buddha is sharing his meditation schedule, that he meditated 3 times a day. And what I encourage people to do is meditate 2 to 3 times per day, morning and evening, and then getting in the middle of the day as you can. What you'll notice is if you meditate just once a day, this isn't enough to actually get to enlightenment, but that might be where you're at, and you need to gradually build up to that. If you get to twice a day, you'll see real significant progress when you get to twice a day. It really increases the amount of development in the mind. If you decide to do 3 per day, that's where you'll really see significant benefits. But again, people need to build up to that. As a household practitioner, if you can get 2 per day, that's quite helpful. Occasionally, maybe you can get a 3rd one in. For people like me and others, like the Buddha and ordained practitioners, this is what we do. There's days where I meditate 4, 5, 6 times a day, because I might be meditating 2 or 3 times with students, and then I'm doing my own meditations as well. And then there's some days where I meditate twice a day. I'm usually getting at least twice a day, no matter what happens, right? So if you do twice a day, you'll notice significant benefits. There was a period of time where when I first learned this teaching, I didn't believe it, of course, because I don't believe any of the things that I read. I test it. So at that time, when I saw this teaching, I was only meditating like once or twice a day. And I was like, all right, the Buddha meditated 3 times a day. Let me see what happens. So I started meditating 3 times a day consistently for a couple of weeks. My goodness, does it make huge effects to the mind, huge benefits. That's why he meditated 3 times a day. So if you choose to build up to that, wonderful. If you have certain periods of time, maybe when you're on holiday or vacation, you can meditate 3 times a day. go for it. Maybe when you're at work, you can only get maybe twice a day. That's fine. Maybe on the weekends, you can get 3 times a day. That's fine, because your benefits are accumulative in nature. You will accumulate the benefits of meditation over multiple weeks and months and years. So if there's certain periods where you can do 2 or 3, wonderful, do those 2 or 3. If there's a week or so where you can only get 1 per day in, okay, that's fine, but be sure that you get to at least 2 per day. That's what would be ideal, kind of morning and evening, and then where you can get in that midday one. Okay, so this is the Buddha describing that he meditated 3 times per day, and he connects it to like a shopkeeper, that a shopkeeper diligently applies himself to work in the morning, the middle of the day, and the evening. Possessing these 3 factors, a shopkeeper is capable of acquiring wealth not yet acquired, and of increasing wealth already acquired. So he's kind of relating what something that unenlightened beings understand, or household practitioners understand, which is acquiring money and acquiring wealth, because there's some benefit that's associated with that. And then if you're diligently applying effort in your business morning, midday, and evening, then over time you will accumulate more and more wealth. And any wealth you've already acquired, you will expand that. And it's the same thing with the path to enlightenment. That is, if you meditate 3 times a day, you'll expand and develop and cultivate your mind more fully over that time. So this is the remaining chapters. There's, of course, plenty for you to learn there, but I think today we've already been studying for looks like 3.5 hours, so this is probably enough for today. And for those of you guys online, thank you all for joining. Looks like, Gary, you have because the question Gary asked, for those of you guys online that might not have heard, he's asking, is there a certain time frame that the Buddha recommended for meditating? So during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't have a precise timepiece like a watch or something like that. So what you do is you look to people who you know today that are meditating, that are developing on the path to enlightenment, or even people that are enlightened. Their mind is peaceful and calm and serene and content with joy. Their mind is focused and having concentration, clarity, and deep memory. They're experiencing the qualities of the enlightened mind, and you ask them, like, how long would you meditate for? What is the good amount of time? What I would recommend for a student is building up to 30 minutes or more. That's what you'll notice the real benefits are, is when you get to that 30-minute mark, that's where you'll notice the real benefits. And that's not to say that 5 or 10 minutes isn't beneficial, because it surely is, but you'll notice the most significant benefits when you get to 30 minutes or more. And the Buddha didn't share this during his lifetime because he didn't have a way to keep track of exactly how much time. The Buddha says that even if you meditate for the snap of a finger, that this is beneficial for you. So that's the way he kept track of time, is based on the snap of a finger. It's interesting because scientists and doctors are researching this now, because we have MRIs and CAT scans and other devices, and they're looking at the brain. And we know that when we're training the mind, there's an effect to the brain. So scientists can monitor with electronic devices the brain, but they can't necessarily monitor the mind because it's intangible and non-physical. And what they're noticing is when people meditate, that there's changes to the physical brain. And they notice that when you meditate, at least this is what the scientists are sharing, is that when you meditate for 25 minutes or more, that's when they're noticing the most changes to the structures of the brain. So what the doctors are saying and the researchers are saying is matching to what I share, which I usually share 30 minutes or more, because the chanting is 2.5 minutes on the way in and 2.5 minutes on the way out. And then if you're meditating for 25 minutes, then it's matching to what the doctors are saying. But I actually started sharing this before I knew this information. Somebody brought this to my attention, that this is what doctors are saying as well. So if you start you look at the clock before you start chanting, which is 9 a.m., and then you start chanting, you meditate, and then you're done chanting, and you look at the clock again, and it's 9:30. Well, I say that's a 30-minute meditation. The doctors might say that that's a 25-minute meditation. So that's where you'll see the most benefits. But of course, it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress to build up to that. People don't usually start with that. Any other questions? All right, so what I'll do then is I'll just end class here by thanking you for reading, thanking you for your questions, thank you for your diligence and determination to learn. Thank you, all of you guys online who might be either watching live or watching this as a replay. Thank you all for your dedication to learning. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be studying what's called the 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. This is where you're going to learn the 10 individual problems in the mind that the Buddha discovered. I'm going to share with you guys what they are and how to eliminate them. This is a more foundational program where I'm actually teaching for 20, 30 minutes, opening up to questions, teaching for another 20, 30 minutes, where this program is more of like a study group that we do. So you can attend that live here at the temple at 9 a.m. or you can join by live stream. I live stream both 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. And then on Wednesday, we also have a regular class where we meet here at the temple and online as well, where I'm sharing meditation. And then next week, Monday through Friday, all throughout the week, there's the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course where students can study from 9 to 3. I won't be live streaming all of that, but students are welcome to join here at the temple. So thank you all, and we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.